The previous governor lasted 3 weeks here. Then he hanged himself in the tower using his own belt. The new governor stands knee-deep in snow, looking at the ruins of the fortress, and instead of running away, he asks where the archives are. Because rats can't falsify estimates, but people can. Now imagine who this new governor is. Just an hour ago, Wayne Astwald was sitting in his office poring over a budget report. His sixth cup of coffee. Numbers. A heaviness in his chest. Darkness. And he woke up in a shaking carriage in a stranger's body with thin wrists and sunken cheeks. A stranger's memories poured into his head like icy water. Father is dead. Debts. His older brother took everything, down to the last candlestick. The Duke signed the decree. Honorary exile. Governor of the province of Greywald, the northernmost point of the empire. A place where people are sent to die. The carriage comes to a stop. The coachman doesn't even turn around. He just shouts that the road ends here. Wayne tumbles knee-deep into the snow. The wind lashes his face with icy grit. He opens his eyes and sees Greywald. The fortress juts out on the hill like a rotten tooth in a dead man's jaw. Half the wall has collapsed. The tower is leaning. The gate hangs by a single hinge. Below, 3 villages are shrouded in a thin, gray haze. The haze means the people are still alive. For now. And here, instead of panic, a habit kicks in, one that even death couldn't kill. Wayne counts. 3 villages. 800 people. 0 budget. Debts exist but are unknown. No firewood. The wells are frozen. No doctor. No blacksmith. He smirks. In his past life, things were worse after the flood. He makes his way toward the fortress, sinking thigh-deep into the snow. 312 steps. Each one feels like the last. At the gate, Dietrich meets him, the former commandant. A red face, cloudy eyes, the reek of alcohol cutting through the frost. He looks at the new governor as if he were Kitten and blurts out that the previous one hanged himself in that tower over there. Wayne looks at the tower. Then he asks where the archives are. Dietrich blinks twice. He was expecting a question about food, about a warm room, about how to get back home. But this one asks about papers, and points to the basement where the rats are. Wayne goes downstairs. Dampness. Darkness. 3 chests that no one has opened in 10 years. He lights a candle stub and reads. Tax records, censuses, I owe us. Each document tells a story. Greywald is dying slowly and surely. 40 years ago the mines closed. 30 years ago the subsidies ran out. 20 years ago the last caravan left. The population has fallen from 5,000 to 800. Every year the young and strong leave. Only the old and those with nowhere else to go remain. Wayne sees faces behind the numbers. Every line crossed out represents a family that left home, or didn't make it. He sits for 4 hours, burns 4 candles, and by the end knows everything about Greywald. 813 people, 3 weeks' worth of food if they ration, 6 more months of winter. And he is here. 0 resources, 0 allies. Outside the wall, it's 24 and falling. He climbs the wall in the dark. The wind nearly knocks him off his feet. Down below, the village glows with sparse lights. These people expect nothing from him. In 40 years, not a single governor has done anything for them. And Wayne stands there, thinking not of revenge, not of greatness, not of magic. He thinks of the heating system. About how he once stood over a crew for 6 hours until they fixed the pipe. 200 apartments without heat at -30. Not a single person froze. Because he knew which valve to close. There are no valves here, no contractors, no phones. But he is here, and that should be enough. Because otherwise, in 3 weeks, people will start dying here. And this is where the strangest part begins. A golden window unfolds before his eyes. Quietly, without a flash. like a notification on a screen. The infinite resources system is activated. Access to supplies is open. Wayne reads it 3 times. He closes his eyes and opens them again. The window is still there. He reaches out, and his fingers pass through the golden light. He thinks of the fortress's empty storeroom. He thinks of firewood, dry birch firewood. The window flashes. Request accepted. Resource available. Wayne runs from the wall across the courtyard. He throws open the warehouse door and freezes. The warehouse is full from wall to wall, neat stacks of dry birch logs. He grabs a log and squeezes it. The bark crunches. Real, not a dream. He slides down the stack onto the floor, sits for a minute, then stands up, dusts himself off, and goes to wake Dietrich. Because the firewood won't deliver itself, and somewhere down below, 813 people are freezing right now. Emotions can wait. Work comes first. Dietrich doesn't want to wake up. Wayne shakes him for a minute. He says there's firewood in the warehouse and they need a cart. The commandant shuffles over to the warehouse, opens the door, and stands. He stands there so long that Wayne has time to map out a route to 3 villages in his head. Dietrich turns around and wheezes, asking where all this is coming from. Wayne replies that explanations can wait. Right now, they need a cart. And the commandant goes to get the cart. Because the firewood is real, and the frost outside the wall is even more real. The 2 of them load the first cart together. Wayne asks who is freezing the most. Dietrich answers without hesitation. The widow Mare in Upper Greywald. 2 children. Her husband froze to death in the field the day before yesterday. The 3 older children froze to death a week ago. He says this in an even voice, like statistics. He's used to it. Wayne isn't. His hands freeze for a second. Then they load faster. Dietrich remarks that the road is dangerous at night. Wayne retorts that the widow won't survive another night without heat. The wagon sets off into the darkness. It's a 2-hour drive. Tracks in the snow. Wayne sits on the firewood and looks at the stars. The stars are foreign. Not a single familiar constellation. A different sky. A different world. The houses of Upper Greywald come into view, and they are all dark. Not a single light. The village is saving every candle. Myra's house is on the edge. It's crooked. The door won't close. The wind blows through the crack. Wayne knocks. Silence. He knocks again. A woman opens the door. She is young, but grief has aged her face so much that her age is impossible to guess. Behind her, 2 children huddle under a single blanket. They aren't asleep. They're trying to stay warm. Wayne says he's the new governor and has brought firewood. She doesn't believe him. No one has ever come here with firewood. Wayne doesn't try to convince her. Silently, he takes an armful of logs, carries them into the house, finds the cold hearth, crouches down, and kindling. His hands do the work on their own. Shavings, splinters, a log, a spark, a second, a third. The fire catches, small, timid, but alive. Warmth comes in waves. The children lift their heads. The youngest girl, about 5 years old, crawls out from under the blanket, approaches the fire, holds out her hands, and laughs. Quietly, hoarsely, as if her throat has forgotten how to do it. Wayne steps out into the frost. He turns to Dietrich and says that the next house is 3 yards away and that they have 14 hours until dawn and 80 cubic meters of firewood on the cart. They work all night, house after house. Wayne knocks, unloads, and stokes the fires for those too weak to do it themselves. Dietrich hauls logs in silence. By the 3rd house, he no longer reeks of alcohol. By the 5th, he picks up the pace. By the 10th, he looks at Wayne for the first time and says the firewood is running out. Wayne nods. They have to go back for a second load. Dietrich doesn't ask where it will come from. He saw the full warehouse. He doesn't understand how. But he hears children waking up in the houses, and that's enough to keep him from asking questions. By dawn, they've covered Upper Town and half of Lower Town. Wayne hasn't slept. His hands are calloused. His body aches. He doesn't stop. On the way back for the third load, a man is standing on the road, tall and gray-haired, a heavy fur coat over a tattered sheepskin coat, a face like an axe. Dietrich quietly mutters that it's Halgar, the village elder. Wayne climbs down from the cart. Halgar looks down at him. He asks if it's true that the new governor has been delivering firewood all night. Wayne replies that it's true and that he'll reach his village by noon. Halgar is silent for a long time. Then he says that his family froze to death yesterday, and that if Wayne wants to be heard, he needs firewood, not promises. Wayne nods toward the full cart behind him. Halgar looks at the cart, then at Wayne, then back at the cart. And for the first time, his expression changes, just a little, as if the axe had grown slightly dull. Halgar didn't leave. He turned around and walked alongside the cart back toward the fortress, in silence. Wayne didn't ask why. A man who has lived on this land for 40 years and buries his neighbors every winter has the right to silently test the one who promises to change everything. They climbed up to the fortress. Wayne opened the storeroom. Halgar entered. He stopped. He looked at the stacks of firewood. He ran his hand over the wood. He sniffed. Birch. Dry. Stored properly. Halgar turned to Wayne and asked where it came from. Wayne said it was from the governor's reserves and that he would explain later. Halgar looked at him with a long, heavy gaze. Then he said he needed more than just firewood. He needed stoves. Because in half the houses in Zyimka, the hearths were destroyed, and heating them was like burning a bonfire in an open field. Half the heat went up into the sky. Wayne closed his eyes. He thought about stoves. Not abstract stoves, specific ones. A cast-iron potbelly stove, a simple design, a cast-iron body, a door with a damper, a chimney made of pipe, legs. He knew how it worked. He'd seen hundreds of them in the villages of the Zauzerski district when he was touring the boiler rooms. He could describe every detail. He mentally formulated a request. 20 cast-iron potbelly stoves with chimney pipes and dampers. The golden window flashed. Request accepted. Wayne opened his eyes and walked to the far end of the warehouse. Behind the wood piles stood 20 stoves, neatly, in a row, with the pipes stacked beside them. He picked up one pipe, heavy, real cast iron. Halgar approached, looked at the stoves, then at Wayne, then back at the stoves. He didn't ask where they came from. He asked how much one weighed and if 2 would fit on a cart. At that moment, Wayne realized that Halgar was exactly the man he needed. A man of action, not a philosopher. When the world around you is falling apart, practical people ask the right questions. Not where, but how much. They loaded 4 furnaces onto the cart. The horse couldn't pull anymore. Wayne asked Halgar if anyone in the villages knew how to set up a furnace. Halgar replied that Bren lived in Lower Greywald, a former mason. Golden hands, but he drinks no less than Dietrich. Wayne said he needed Bren sober by noon. Halgar snorted and said that no one had seen Bren sober in 3 years. Wayne replied that, in that case, he needed Bren in any condition, but with his tools. Halgar nodded and left. Wayne turned to Dietrich. The commandant stood by the wagon and looked at the stoves. His eyes were no longer cloudy, tired, red from a sleepless night, but not cloudy. Wayne told him they needed to go to Halgar's homestead. Dietrich took the reins without a word. They set up the first stove in the house of an old woman named Gerda. She was 70 or so. She lived alone. The hearth in her house had collapsed 5 years ago, and since then she had kept warm by burning rags and straw in an iron basin in the middle of the room. The room was black with soot. Wayne examined the floor. The boards were rotten, but They'll hold up if he puts a stone slab under the legs. He requested 4 stone slabs from the system. Then he remembered that the warehouse was in the fortress. The slabs would appear there, not here. That was an important limitation. Everything had to be hauled from the warehouse. He made a mental note of it. He'd need a staging warehouse in every village. But that was for later. Right now, he found flat stones in the yard. He placed them under the legs. He set up the pot-belly stove. He ran the pipe out the window through a hole he'd punched with the handle of a shovel, wrapping it in a rag. Rough, ugly, but the pipe was in place. The damper worked. He loaded the firewood. He lit it. The stove hummed. Warmth spread through the room. Real warmth from cast iron. Not that pitiful flicker the fire in the basin had given. Old woman Gerda sat on a bench and looked at the stove. Then she reached out and placed her palm on the cast iron side. Warm. She didn't take her hand away. She just sat there. Vane slipped out quietly. Bren came to the third house. Short, broad, hands like shovels, red eyes. But he stood straight, and he had his tools with him. Halger had dragged him there by the collar. Literally. Bren looked at the stove that Wayne had installed in the tanner's house and said the chimney was installed incorrectly. The angle was too steep. The draft would be weak, and smoke would seep into the room. Wayne stopped. He looked at the pipe. Bren was right. Wayne knew it. He had deliberately installed it incorrectly because he didn't have the right elbow. Bren took the pipe from him. He looked at it. He grunted. He pulled a hammer from his belt. In 10 minutes, he bent an elbow out of a straight pipe. With his hands. Without a machine. He installed it. The draft hummed evenly. The smoke went up. Bren turned to Wayne and asked if there were any more stoves. Wayne replied that there were 16. Bren nodded and said he'd have them all installed by evening if they gave him an assistant and stopped bothering him with advice. Wayne gave him Dietrich and left. He walked back to the fortress through the central village. Upper Greywald. The village was waking up. Wayne saw smoke coming from the chimneys, real, thick smoke. There hadn't been any yesterday. People were stepping out onto their doorsteps and looking at him. The new governor, skinny, in a soaked doublet, with calluses on his hands and soot on his face. He didn't look like a governor. He looked like a laborer after a night shift. No one spoke to him. But no one turned away either. It was a start. Small, fragile, but a beginning. At the fortress, Wayne went straight to the storeroom. He asked for paper, ink, a quill. He got them. He sat down at a table in the guardhouse and began to write. Not a decree, not an edict. A list. Name, house, number of people in the family, age, occupation, if any. Condition of the home. Needs. He wrote down everything he had learned that night. The Myra family. A widow. 2 children. A house on the edge of the village. The door is broken. Needs repair. Old woman Gerda. Alone. A house covered in soot. Needs cleaning and whitewashing. The tanner from the third house. Wife and 4 children. The roof is leaking. Needs boards. He filled 12 sheets of paper. Then he reread it. Then he made a second list. Priorities. Red level. Houses where people might freeze tonight. Yellow level. Houses where it's cold but bearable. Green level. Homes where there is a stove and it works. There were 23 red ones, 41 yellow ones, 11 green ones. He hadn't seen the rest of the homes yet. That means Halgarova Zymka and part of Lower Greewald haven't been surveyed. A census is needed, a complete one, door to door, like in Zauzersk after the flood. Every house, every person, every hole in the roof. Wayne asked the system what was available to him. A golden window unfolded before his eyes. The resource catalog was enormous. Everything he had ever seen and understood. Wood, stone, brick, cast iron, steel, fabric, grain, salt, tools, medicines. The simplest ones. Bandages, alcohol, Herbal remedies he remembered from the first aid kit in the administration office. He could request anything, in any quantity, but only for the warehouse, and only what he could explain. He tried requesting an electric generator. The system rejected it. He didn't know the generator's design in enough detail. He tried requesting an antibiotic. Rejected. No knowledge of chemistry. He tried requesting a firearm. Rejected. Insufficient understanding of the barrel's metallurgy. The system only provided what Wayne could assemble and use with his own hands, or explain to others how to do it. Not a magic wand. A materializer of knowledge. A huge difference. He compiled a third list. Things he knew well enough to request. Furnaces. Yes. Hand tools. Yes. Saws, axes, hammers, nails. Yes. Bricks. Yes. He remembered the firing process. Glass. Partially. He knew the principle but not the exact temperatures. Soap. Yes. The recipe for the simplest soap made from lye and fat. The simplest plumbing. Yes. Wooden pipes. Clay pipes. A gravity-fed system. Crop rotation. Yes. The three-field system. Concrete. Yes. Lime mortar. The Roman recipe. Epsom salt. Yes. He remembered the formula. Paper. Yes. Windmill. Partially. He remembered the principle but not all the details. He filled 4 more sheets of paper. Then he set down his pen. His hands were shaking from exhaustion. He hadn't slept in over a day. His body demanded sleep. But the list wasn't finished. The list would never be finished. Wayne understood this better than anyone. Municipal work never ends. It continues as long as the city stands, or until the one who does it falls. He forced himself to sleep for 3 hours. He lay down right on the table in the guardhouse. The stone was cold. He requested a woolen blanket from the system. He went to the storeroom. He took it. He covered himself. He fell asleep instantly. He woke up to a knock. A girl was standing in the doorway, tall, slender. A wheat-colored braid draped over her shoulder, a weather-beaten face. Her eyes were gray and angry. She asked if he was the governor who had been hauling firewood that night. Wayne sat up. He rubbed his eyes. He replied that he was. The girl said her name was Sarana, Halgar's daughter, and that her father had sent her to ask when the stoves for Zaimka would arrive. Wayne looked at his watch. He didn't have a watch. He looked out the window. The sun was low, so it must be around noon. He said the stoves would be delivered by evening. Sarana didn't leave. She stood in the doorway and looked at the lists spread out across the table. She asked what they were. Wayne replied that they were a census and a work plan. Sarana walked over. She looked at the entries. She read a few lines. Then she pointed to one line and said that the Torvin family from Lower Greywald had moved away last fall. Their house stands empty. Wayne took a pen and crossed out the line. Sarana pointed to another entry and said that Hilda from Zaimka has not 4 children, but 5. The youngest was born a month ago. Wayne finished writing. Sarana watched him. The way he listened. The way he wrote things down. The way he didn't argue or say he knew better. She was seeing this for the first time. Wayne asked if she knew all the residents of Zaimka by name. Sarana replied that she knew all the residents of all 3 villages by name, and their children, and their dogs. Wayne looked at her. Then he slid a stack of blank paper and a quill toward her. He said he needed a complete household census of the 3 villages. Every house, every person. The condition of the dwellings, their needs. Sarana took the quill. She looked at him as if he were crazy. But she sat down and began to write. Her handwriting was large and crooked, but every name was correct. Every detail was accurate. Wayne sat across from her and compiled his lists based on her data. They worked in silence for 3 hours. By the end, they had the full picture. 811 people. 2 had died while Wayne was riding in the carriage. 173 houses. Of those, 47 were in critical condition, 32 without a working hearth, 19 with damaged roofs, 11 with flooded floors, 6 abandoned. Wayne looked at the numbers. He looked at Serrana. He said he needed a foreman to oversee the repairs, a man who knew the villages and whom the men would listen to. Serrana replied that there were no such people in Greyvald. Everyone who knew how to lead had long since gone south. Wayne said that one such man was sitting right in front of him. Serrana stopped. The pen froze over the paper. She looked at Wayne. Something strange flashed in her gray, angry eyes. Not gratitude, not surprise. Confusion. She had never been appointed to anything. People had always just dumped work on her and walked away. And this skinny governor with soot on his face was sitting across from her, offering her a position. Officially. As if it were normal. As if a woman from the village could be a foreman. Serrana said the men wouldn't listen to her. Wayne replied that they would, because he would issue a decree. Number 1. Appointing Serrana Halgar as senior foreman of repair work for Greywald Province, with the authority to allocate people and materials. Serrana snorted and said that a piece of paper wouldn't convince anyone. Wayne agreed. He said a piece of paper wouldn't convince them. The stoves that she'll bring to every home, and firewood, and roof boards, and nails. A person who brings warmth into a home doesn't need a piece of paper to be listened to. But there will be a piece of paper, just in case. By the evening of the second day, Bren had installed all 20 stoves in Halgar's homestead and parts of Lower Greywald. Wayne requested 30 more. 30 more arrived at the warehouse. Dietrich hauled them in a cart. Serrana distributed them to the houses. Bren installed them. Halgar followed behind and checked. 4 people. Greywald's first team. By nightfall on the second day, 50 houses had working stoves. Wayne stood on the fortress wall and looked down. Smoke was rising from the chimneys. Thick, white smoke against the black sky. 50 plumes of smoke. Yesterday there were 11, he counted. 123 houses remained. 32 of them had no hearth at all. We need at least 40 more stoves. We need chimneys. We need stone slabs. We need a second mason because Bren is working 18-hour days and will soon collapse. We need food. He fed the crew from the system's supplies. Bread, porridge, salted meat. Simple food, but hot and filling. Bren ate 3 servings and didn't say thank you. But he didn't leave. And he didn't get drunk. That was better than any thank you. On the third day, Wayne set about finding water. The wells were frozen. People were melting snow. It takes a long time and yields little water. We need a source that doesn't freeze. Wayne walked around the perimeter of the fortress. He found a stream on the northern slope of the hill. The stream flowed from beneath a rock. The water was icy but liquid. That meant somewhere below there was a warm spring or an aquifer deep enough not to freeze. He measured the distance from the stream to the fortress in steps. 420 steps. About 300 meters. An elevation difference of about 15 meters. The stream is higher than the fortress. Gravity feed. No pump needed. Just a pipe. He requested clay pipes from the system. Hollow. 10 centimeters in diameter. Socketed. With bell mouths. 300 of them. 1 meter long. 300 pipes appeared in the warehouse, neatly stacked. Wayne looked at them and realized he needed people to lay them. A lot of people. He went down to Upper Greywald, found Halgar. He said he needed 20 men for 3 days to lay a water pipeline. Halgar looked at him. He asked what a water pipeline was. Wayne explained. A pipe from the stream to the fortress. From there, distribution to the villages. Clean water in every home without having to melt snow. Halgar listened. His expression didn't change. Then he asked what the men would get for their work. Wayne said that each worker would receive 3 hot meals a day and an extra portion of firewood for their family. Halgar thought about it. Then he nodded. By noon, 22 men were standing by the fortress. 2 had come on their own, without an invitation. They'd heard about the food and firewood. Wayne handed out the tools, shovels, pickaxes, all from the system's warehouse. He marked out the route with stakes. He explained what needed to be done. Dig a half-meter deep trench from the stream to the fortress. Lay pipes. Backfill. The men listened. Some with skepticism, some with interest. One asked why put pipes in the ground when you could just carry water in buckets. Wayne replied that a bucket of water weighs 10 kilograms, and that a woman who carries water from the stream 3 times a day spends an hour she could spend on her children or work. The man fell silent. Then he picked up a shovel. They began to dig. The soil was heavy, frozen solid for half a meter. The pickaxes clanged against the rock. Wayne worked alongside everyone else. He dug. He hauled pipes. He mixed clay for the joints. By evening, they had covered 60 meters. Wayne did the math. At this rate, they'd finish in 5 days, not 3. They needed more people or a different approach. He thought about it. Then he requested iron crowbars from the system. Heavy ones, with sharp ends. He handed them out instead of pickaxes. The work went faster. The frozen ground yielded better to the crowbars than to the pickaxes. On the second day, they covered 150 meters. On the third, they reached the fortress. On the fourth, they connected the first branch to Upper Greywald. The water started flowing, a thin stream from a clay pipe into a wooden trough in the village square. People watched. The first person held out a bucket. The water was clear and icy, but it flowed on its own. No more buckets from the stream. No more hour-long walks through the snow. It just flowed. The water changed everything. Not right away, not in a day, but by the end of the first week, Wayne saw the difference. The women stopped going to the stream with buckets. That's 2 hours a day. 2 hours that were now spent cooking, mending clothes, and looking after the children. A trifle. For a man from another world, a trifle. For Greywald, it was a miracle on a par with the advent of stoves. Sarana told him about it on the evening of the 5th day, when they were sitting in the guardhouse over a map, planning a water pipeline branch to Lower Greywald. She said that Hilda from Zaimka had baked bread for the first time in 3 months, because she now had time to knead the dough. Before, the whole day had been spent on survival, on obtaining water and heat. When survival stops taking up the whole day, people begin to live. Wayne wrote this down, not on a list, in his head. It was more important than any list. On the 6th day, he turned his attention to food. The system's supplies were endless, but Wayne fed only the work crews from them. The rest of the residents fed themselves. Poorly. Very poorly. He visited 3 villages in a day. He looked into every house. He asked to see their supplies. People showed them reluctantly. Hiding food from neighbors was a habit ingrained by years of hardship. The picture was the same everywhere. A sack of barley, a sack of turnips, salted meat if they were lucky, groats if someone had traveled south in the fall and traded for it. No milk. The cows died 2 winters ago. There were almost no chickens left. There was game, but few hunters, and the forest was dangerous in winter. According to Wayne's calculations, there was enough food for 6 weeks. Then the famine would begin. Not the kind of hunger where you just want to eat, the kind of hunger where children die. Wayne returned to the fortress and sat poring over the plan for 4 hours. He couldn't just hand out food from the system to everyone. Or rather, he could. But that would create dependency. 800 people used to the governor feeding them like baby birds. If he were to lose his position or die, everything would collapse. He needed a system that worked without him, or at least started working without him. He drew up a plan. Point 1. A community kitchen in every village, one for all the families. Hot meals twice a day. Porridge in the morning, meat stew in the evening. Food from the governor's warehouse, but prepared by the locals, themselves, on schedule. 3 women per shifts, on duty by the day. Point 2. Hunting cooperatives. Gather everyone who knows how to go into the forest. Issue equipment, bows, arrows, snares, winter hunting. The meat goes to the communal kitchen. The hides are used for clothing and shoes. Point 3. Fishing. He saw a lake on the map 2 hours to the east. There should be fish under the ice in winter. We need nets and someone who knows how to set them. He called Sarana and Halgar. He laid out the plan. Halgar listened in silence. Then he said that a communal kitchen is fine, but people won't share. Every family is used to eating their own food. If someone brings more, they don't want to feed those who bring less. Wayne nodded. He said that was exactly why the food would come from his warehouse and not from family reserves. No one loses anything. Everyone gets something. This isn't communism, it's a school cafeteria. Halgar didn't understand the term school cafeteria, but he understood the principle. He nodded reluctantly. Sarana asked who would do the cooking. Wayne said he needed 3 women who knew how to cook for a large family. Sarana named 6 names in 10 seconds. Wayne chose 3 for the first shift and 3 for the second. He wrote down the schedule. He issued Decree Number 2 on the establishment of public kitchens in 3 settlements in the province of Greywald. Halgar looked at the stamped paper and shook his head, but he didn't object. The first kitchen opened on the 7th day, in Upper Greywald. Wayne requested 3 large cast iron pots from the system, ladles, bowls, spoons, sacks of barley groats, sacks of flour, a barrel of salted pork, salt, dried onions, oil. Everything appeared in the warehouse. Sarana organized the delivery. By that point, Bren had already finished with the stoves, and Wayne asked him to build a shelter for the kitchen. A simple one. 4 posts, a roof made of planks, walls of burlap so the wind wouldn't blow out the fire. Bren built it in a day. 3 women came in the morning and started cooking porridge, a large pot. Barley porridge with salt and oil, simple food, but hot and plentiful. People came, at first cautiously, then more confidently. The children first, then the elderly, then everyone else. By noon the pot was empty. The women started cooking a second batch. Wayne stood to the side and counted the portions. 128 people on the first day. Out of the 340 residents of Upper Greywald, a third. By the 3rd day, 200 people were already coming to the kitchen. By the 5th day, everyone who could walk was there. Even the most stubborn stopped keeping their distance when they saw that there was enough food for everyone, and no one was asking for anything in return. On the 8th day, Wayne faced his first real problem. Not a technical one, a human one. The village head of Lower Greywald, named Otto, came to the fortress. Short, fat. The only fat person in the province. That alone was suspicious. Otto declared that the community kitchen in Upper Greywald was operating, but there was none in Lower Greywald. That it was unfair, that his people were starving while the village of Halga eats at the governor's expense. Wayne looked at Otto. He looked at his fur coat, a fine coat, fox fur. He looked at his boots, in good condition, warm. Then he glanced at his records. Lower Greywald, 280 residents. Food supplies according to the census. 1 sack of barley per family. About the same as everywhere else. But that night, Wayne had gone over the old tax records and found something interesting. 10 years ago, Lower Greywald received more of the Imperial supplies than any other village. Much more. 3 villages received equal shares, while Lower Greywald received twice as much. The signature on the records. Otto, the village headman. 10 years in power, the only fat man in a starving province. Wayne didn't accuse him. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten him. He simply said that the kitchen in Lower Greywald would open tomorrow. But it wouldn't be Otto running it. It would be someone Wayne personally appointed. and that all food supplies in the village would be inventoried. Everything, including the village headman's personal reserves. Otto turned pale. Just a little, but enough for Wayne to notice. Otto said that this was interference in the village's affairs, that the village head was chosen by the residents, and that the governor had no right. Wayne pulled a piece of paper from the stack. The Imperial Decree on the Powers of the Provincial Governor. Section 4, Paragraph 12. The governor has the right to conduct an audit of food supplies in the event of a threat of famine. And according to Wayne's calculations, famine would set in 4 weeks, so the audit would begin in the morning. Otto stood there in silence. Then he turned and walked away. Wayne watched him go. The first enemy within. A minor one, predictable, but dangerous because people were used to listening to him. That evening, Sarana smiled in Wayne's presence for the first time. Not at him, more at the situation. She stood in the guardhouse doorway and watched Otto walk down through the snow toward his village. Quickly, almost running. Sarana said that for 10 years Otto had been stealing the grain the Empire sent for everyone and hiding it in his cellar. Everyone knew. No one could do anything about it, because Otto was the only one in Lower Greywald who could read and write, and all the paperwork went through him. Wayne nodded. He said he would need Sarana and 4 trustworthy men tomorrow for an audit. Sarana replied that she had 12 trustworthy men, and they would all be happy to help with the Otto's place. Wayne said that an audit wasn't a raid. It was a procedure, with an inventory, with a report, with witness signatures. Sarana rolled her eyes, but she nodded. On the morning of the 9th day, Wayne arrived in Lower Greywald with Sarana and 4 men. Otto met them at his house, sober, angry. 3 of his men stood nearby, burly fellows, smugglers from the northern border. Wayne recognized them from Dietrich's description. They hauled goods across the pass and sold them in Greywald for triple the price. Salt, tobacco, cheap wine. Otto was their front. They were his enforcers, a simple scheme, as familiar as an old jacket. Every small town has its own Otto and its own smugglers. Wayne had dealt with such people in Zauzursk. The businessman Mukhtarov, who ran the market, and 2 local police officers. The method of dealing with them was the same. Not force, economics. Wayne stopped in front of Otto, calmly. He said he had come to conduct an inspection in accordance with Imperial law. He asked to open the cellar. Otto said he wouldn't open it. One of the smugglers stepped forward. Wayne didn't step back. He looked at the smuggler and asked his name. The smuggler was flustered. He said his name was Rudd. Wayne nodded. He said that Rudd and his comrades were smuggling through the northern pass. That he could supply the goods they sell cheaper. For free, actually. That starting today, salt and soap in Greywald would be in public warehouses, and that any resident could get their share. Rudd looked at Otto. Otto looked at Wayne. Wayne continued. He said that Rudd and his men had a choice. They could keep hauling goods over the pass and selling them to people who now get everything for free. Or they could work for the province. Haul cargo. They have horses and sleds. They know the trails. They have strength. Wayne pays for 3 hot meals a day and lodging in the fortress. Rudd and his men stood there. They thought. They calculated. A smuggler who can't do math doesn't live long. Rudd did the math quickly. If salt and soap are free, his business is over. If he goes to work for the governor, he eats and sleeps in the warmth. He looked at Otto, then at Wayne, then stepped aside. Otto was left alone, without his fists. Wayne asked again to open the cellar. Otto opened it. Downstairs, Sarana counted 12 sacks of barley, 8 sacks of flour, 3 barrels of salted meat, a barrel of honey, a box of candles. This was in a village where people ate turnips and melted snow for heat. Wayne made an inventory. Every sack, every barrel. He signed it. He asked Otto to sign. Otto signed. His hands were shaking. Wayne said that the supplies would be confiscated for the benefit of the Lower Greywald Community Kitchen, that Otto was stepping down as village head, that a new village head would be elected by the residents in a week, and that Otto could stay in the village as an ordinary resident with the right to communal food and warmth like everyone else. Or he could leave. Otto chose to stay. He had nowhere else to go. A week later, the residents of Lower Greywald elected a woman named Era as the new village head, the blacksmith's widow. Quiet, tough, fair. Wayne confirmed her with Decree Number 5. By the end of the second week, all 3 villages had functioning kitchens. The water supply had reached Lower Greywald. Halgarova's outpost received water from a separate spring that Sarana had found on the southern slope. Bren and the 2 apprentices he had recruited himself set up a total of 80 stoves. Wayne counted. Not a single person had frozen in 2 weeks. That was the first achievement. Small, invisible to the world. But for Greywald, it was like dawn after an endless night. He stood on the fortress wall on the evening of the 14th day and looked out at the 3 villages, smoke rising from every chimney, light in every window. 811 people who had eaten a hot meal today and would go to sleep in the warmth. He thought that in Zauzursk, they wouldn't even give a certificate for this, just a line in the quarterly report. Heat supply restored. Population provided for. Next item. On the 15th day, the first strangers arrived in Greywald. A family, a man, a woman, 3 children. They emerged from the forest onto the northern road, barely alive, frostbitten, hungry. The youngest child couldn't walk, and the father carried him in his arms. Sarana saw them first. She brought them to the fortress. Wayne looked at them and saw what he had feared. Refugees. The first, not the last. The man said they were from the province of Merhold, that Duke Crane had bought up all the grain and prices had quadrupled, that their village had died out in 2 months, that they were heading north because someone at the market had said they were giving out food in Greywald. Wayne asked who had said it. The man didn't remember. Someone. Rumors. A starving man follows any rumor of food like a moth to a flame. Wayne fed them. He put them up in one of the empty houses in Upper Greywald. He gave them a stove, firewood, blankets, warm clothes for the children, each item separately. Boots for the boy, size 30, felt boots for the girl, size 28, mittens for the youngest, tiny ones. The system provided everything. Wayne sat in the guardhouse that evening, thinking. If the rumors had reached Merhold, that meant more would be coming soon. And more. And more. Greywald could take them in. The system could feed them. But the villages weren't made of rubber. There wouldn't be enough houses. They need to build. In winter. In the cold. He unfolded the map. He looked at the fortress. The inner courtyard is large. The walls may be ruined, but the foundation is intact. If they build a long barracks inside the fortress, they can house 50 people. If 2 barracks, then 100. He thought about materials. Wood, lumber, planks, nails, insulation. He could request everything from the system. But people have to do the building. And there aren't enough people. And they're busy with their current tasks. He called for Sarana. She came with cheeks red from the cold and a scowl on her face. She always looked angry when she was tired. Wayne was used to it. He said they needed to build barracks. Sarana asked who would build them. Wayne replied that everyone would. Anyone who could hold a hammer, including the refugees. Sarana looked at him. She asked if it wasn't too soon to make people work who had just arrived half dead. Wayne said he wasn't forcing them. He's offering. Work for housing. You build the barracks you'll live in. Fair enough, Sarana thought. She nodded. Fair enough. 3 days later, a second family arrived. 5 days later, a third. By the end of the 3rd week, there were 20 new people in Greywald. Wayne registered each one. Name, where from, how many people, profession, needs. The system's golden window flickered before his eyes every time he registered a new resident. managerial intuition. He sensed the province, like an organism, where it hurts, where the tension lies, where resources are being wasted. This feeling grew stronger with each passing day. He sensed that a quarrel was brewing in Halgarova Zaimka between two families over a plot of land. He sensed that Bren was on the verge of a breakdown and needed a day off. He sensed that in Lower Greyvald, the new village elder, Era, was worried about the refugees and feared they would be given the locals' homes. None of this was magic. It was an administrative intuition amplified to superhuman levels. The very same ability that allowed him in Zauzersk to walk into a subordinate's office and say right off the bat, "So, what's happened here?" Only now, the scope wasn't a single office, but 40,000 hectares. He solved the problem with Era first. He went to see her in person, sat down at the table, told her that the refugees wouldn't be given the locals' homes. They would live in barracks inside the fortress, separately, until they built their own homes. After that, they would be allocated a plot of land. Not in the village, nearby, a new district, with its own kitchen and well. Era listened. Then she asked if the outsiders would become a burden. Wayne replied that among the 20 new residents there was a carpenter and 2 shepherds, and that all 3 were already working on the barracks construction site. Era nodded. The tension eased. Not completely, but enough for Wayne to stop feeling it. He resolved the dispute in Zaimka in 10 minutes. He arrived, looked at the plot. 2 yards. Between them, a strip of land 3 paces wide. Both neighbors considered it theirs. Wayne asked to see the documents. There were no documents. Neither of them had any. He looked at the provincial map. The plot boundaries weren't marked, because no one had ever staked them out. Wayne took out a rope and stakes. He measured it out. He divided the strip in half. He drove in the stakes. He said this was a temporary boundary until spring. In the spring, there would be a general survey of all the plots. Both neighbors were unhappy. Both got half instead of the whole. That meant the decision was fair. On the 20th day, Wayne thought about medicine for the first time. The reason was a girl from a refugee family, 6 years old. A cough that hadn't gone away for a week. Her mother came every day and asked for medicine. Wayne didn't have any medicine. Or rather, he did. Bandages, rubbing alcohol, herbal remedies, a basic first aid kit. But a cough isn't a cut. A cough could be a cold, or it could be the start of something terrible. Wayne wasn't a doctor. He realized his knowledge wasn't enough. He needed a medic, a real one. He asked Halgar if there was anyone in the area who knew anything about medicine. Halgar shook his head. The last healer left 15 years ago. Sarana said that a herbalist lived in the forest west of Zaimka. An old woman, a strange one. People go to her when they're in a real bind. Wayne asked if Sarana could bring her. Sarana replied that the herbalist never goes anywhere. People go to her. Wayne stood up, put on his cloak, set off. The journey took 2 hours. A path through the forest. Snow up to their waists in some places. Sarana walked ahead and cleared the way. She knew the forest like the back of her hand. Every rock, every fallen tree. The herbalist's house stood in a clearing. Small, log-built, the roof covered in moss. Smoke was coming from the chimney. Sarana stopped at the gate and said that Wayne had to go on alone, that the herbalist didn't like it when people came in a crowd. Wayne nodded and entered the yard. The door opened before he knocked. A woman stood in the doorway, old, thin as a twig, sharp eyes. She looked at Wayne and said she knew who he was, that she'd heard about the stoves and the water, and that if he'd come to take her to the village, he should turn back. Wayne said he hadn't come to take her. He had come to ask for help. His child was sick and he needed advice. The herbalist was silent for a long time. Then she stepped aside and let him into the house. Inside it smelled of dried herbs and smoke. Floor-to-ceiling shelves were lined with pots and pouches. The herbalist sat down on a bench and motioned for Wayne to take a stool. He sat down. He described the symptoms: a cough, a weak, phlegm, a slight fever. The herbalist listened. Then she asked if the child was eating. Wayne said he was, but not much. The herbalist stood up. She took 3 small bags from the shelf: coltsfoot, thyme, licorice root. She explained how to brew it, the proportions, the steeping time, how much to give. Then she said that if it didn't get better in 3 days, he should come back. Wayne thanked her. He stood up and asked the question any normal administrator would ask. He asked how much she charged for the consultation. The herbalist looked at him. She smiled. She said she didn't charge anything, because there was no one to charge. Greywald is a poor town. She lives off what the forest provides. Wayne nodded. Then he said he wanted to build her a medical clinic. In the fortress, a warm room, shelves for herbs, an examination table, a supply of materials. A place where she could treat patients not in a forest hut, but under normal conditions. The herbalist was silent. Then she asked why she needed it. Wayne replied that it wasn't for her, it was for the people. It was a 2-hour walk through the snow to her house. A sick child wouldn't make it. A sick old man certainly wouldn't. A medical clinic was needed within walking dot. The herbalist looked at him. For a long time. Then she said she would think about it. Wayne left. 3 days later, the girl was feeling better. The decoction had helped. 5 days later, the herbalist came to the fortress herself, with a sack of herbs on her back and a cat under her arm. She said she'd thought it over, that she agreed, but that if anyone called her a witch, she'd go back to the forest and let them get sick on their own. Wayne issued Decree No. 7 on the establishment of a medical clinic in the province of Greywald, on the appointment of Martha Valchin as chief healer, prohibiting the use of the word witch in official documents and when addressing medical station staff. Martha read the decree. She looked at Wayne over the paper. She smiled for the first time. The cat jumped down from her arms and went to explore the fortress. By the end of the first month, Greywald had changed. Not beyond recognition, but enough that a person who had left a month ago wouldn't recognize it upon returning. Stoves stood in every house. The water supply was working. 3 communal kitchens fed everyone. The medical station was treating the sick. The first barracks inside the fortress had been completed. 30 refugees lived there. Construction had begun on the second barracks. The population had grown to 850. Bren hadn't had a drink in 20 days. Dietrich hadn't had a drink in 15 days. Sarana had smiled 3 times already. Halgar had started attending the morning meetings of his own accord. Rudd and his 2 men were transporting goods between the villages faster and more carefully than any wagon before them. Ira had brought order to Lower Greywald in a week. The refugees' children were playing with the local children, just with snowballs for now. But it was a start. Wayne stood in his office, a former guardhouse that he had converted into a workspace. A desk, a map on the wall, lists, charts, schedules, decrees from the 1st to the 9th. He looked at the map and thought about the coming month. We need a brick factory. Wood is fine for barracks, but for serious construction, we need bricks. He knew the process: clay, molding, drying, firing. He could design a kiln. He just needed to find the clay. He marked 3 spots on the map where, according to Halgar's description, the soil was rich and reddish. Tomorrow, he would go check them out. Then the soap factory. Soap isn't a luxury. Soap is hygiene. Hygiene is health. Health is working hands. Working hands are construction. It's all connected. Everything was just like in Zauzersk. Only the scale was different, and the contractors didn't take kickbacks. Yet. The second month began with clay. Wayne got up before dawn. He got dressed. He grabbed a sack and a shovel. He headed to the first of the 3 spots marked on the map. The southern slope beyond Halgar's Zaimka. The snow here was thinner. The wind had blown it off the hill, exposing the ground. Wayne dug in. The frozen soil wouldn't give way. He dug deeper. At a depth of a shovel's blade and a half, he hit clay. Reddish. Rich. It stuck to his fingers. He kneaded the lump in his hands. Malleable. No coarse sand. Good clay. He filled a sack and hauled it back. He checked the second spot, north of the fortress, beyond the ravine. There was clay there too, but mixed with stones. Worse. The third spot turned out to be a bust, just sand and loam. So the first spot, the southern slope, the quarry will be there. Upon returning, he spread the clay out on the table in his office and ran the tests he could remember. He rolled a ball, threw it on the floor. The ball didn't crumble, so the cohesion is good. He rolled it into a sausage shape, bent it into a ring. It didn't crack, so the plasticity is sufficient for molding. He requested wooden brick molds from the system, standard ones, 25 by 12 by 6.5 centimeters. 50 molds appeared in the warehouse. Then he requested a blueprint for a kiln. The system didn't provide blueprints directly. It provided materials. Wayne had to draw the blueprint himself. He sat down and drew for 3 hours. A floor-mounted, ring-type kiln, a simplified version. The firebox at the bottom, the firing chamber at the top, a chimney. The firing temperature was about 900 degrees. He remembered those figures. There was a brick factory in Zauzersk, and Wayne had gone there twice to inspect it. Back then, it had seemed like routine. Now that knowledge was worth more than gold. He showed the drawing to Bren at breakfast. Bren chewed his porridge and looked at the paper. Then he poked his finger at the firebox and said the walls were too thin. They'd crack from the heat. Wayne agreed. He thickened the walls on the drawing. Bren pointed to the chimney and said the draft would be weak if the pipe was so short. Wayne lengthened the pipe. Bren nodded. Then he asked who would build it. Wayne said he would. And Bren. And 5 workers that Serrana would assign from the crew. Bren finished his porridge and said he'd start after lunch. By this point, Wayne had gotten used to the fact that Bren never turned down work. He just tweaked the blueprints and got to the job. The perfect foreman, always frowning, always dissatisfied, always on site. Building the kiln took 8 days. They dug the foundation pit. They laid the stone foundation. They hauled the stone from the river. Heavy, smooth, icy. Vane worked alongside everyone else. His hands were covered with new calluses on top of the old ones. Bren supervised the masonry. Serrana brought in the materials. Rudd and his men hauled stones on sleds. By the 8th day, the kiln stood. Clumsy, rough, but it stood. Wayne requested firewood from the system for the first firing. Dry, birch, dense. They loaded the firebox. They lit. The kiln hummed. Smoke rose up the chimney. The draft was good. Bren grunted and said that maybe this thing wouldn't fall apart after all. For Bren, that was the highest praise. The first batch of bricks came out 4 days later, 200 of them. Wayne took one out of the kiln. Hot, red, resonant. He tapped it with his knuckles. The sound was clear. No cracks. He set the brick on the ground and stepped on it. The brick held. Wayne picked it up and turned it over in his hands. A bit crooked, uneven, far from factory standards. But it was a brick. Greywald's first brick. He'd made it from local clay with local hands in a local kiln, without the system. Or rather, the system had provided the molds and tools. But people dug the clay. People built the kiln. People fired it. That was important, critically important. Because if the system disappeared tomorrow, Greywald would be able to make bricks on his own. Wayne placed the brick on the desk in his office, next to the decrees and lists. Let it stay there. A reminder. The soap factory was simpler. Wayne knew the recipe by heart. Lye from ash, fat, boiling, molding. He requested an iron cauldron from the system, a large one, 200 liters, soap molds, wooden ones. They collected ash from all the stoves in the villages. The hunting guild provided the fat. By this time, the hunters were working constantly, 6 men. They would go into the forest for 3 days and return with their catch. Hares, deer, partridges. The meat went to the kitchens. The hides went to the workshop where 3 women from Zyimka sewed clothes and shoes. The fat went to the soap factory. Nothing went to waste. Every resource was used to the fullest. Vane drew up a resource flowchart. Hunting yields meat, hides, and fat. Meat goes to the kitchens. Hides go to the workshop. Fat goes to the soap factory. Ash from the ovens goes to the soap factory. Soap goes to the warehouse and from there for distribution. A closed cycle. Beautiful. Just like in a textbook. Only the textbook was written on the fly in a frozen fortress on the edge of the empire. The first soap was made on the 35th day. Sarana brought a bar to Vane. Brown. Rough. Smells like lye. But it lathers. Vane took the bar and went to the infirmary to see Martha. He placed it on the table in front of her and said that now there is soap in Greywald, and that he wants Martha to draw up hygiene rules for all residents. Washing hands before eating, washing clothes once a week, a bathhouse. He asked if they could build a bathhouse. Martha looked at him as if he were a saint. Then she said that a bathhouse was the best thing he could have come up with. That half the illnesses in Greywald were caused by dirt. That if people started washing, she would be able to treat colds instead of festering wounds and lice. Wayne nodded. Noted. Bathhouse. High priority. He designed the bathhouse in one evening. A simple structure. A log cabin. A stone stove made of boulders. An antechamber. A washing area. Steam room. Water supplied through a pipe from the water main. Drainage into the ravine. Capacity for 20 people at a time. Operating schedule. Men's days, women's days, children's hours. He showed the blueprint to Bren. Bren looked at it and said the stove was too small. For 20 people, a bigger one was needed. Wayne enlarged the stove. Bren said the foundation wouldn't hold it now. Wayne reinforced the foundation. Bren nodded. Building the bathhouse took 12 days. Sarana organized a crew of 10 people. Among them were not only locals, but also 2 refugees. Graf, the carpenter from Merhold, worked like a man possessed. His hands remembered wood. He erected the bathhouse walls in 3 days, the roof in 2. Bren laid the stove himself. He wouldn't let anyone else near it. He said that the stove was the heart of the bathhouse, and that you don't trust the heart to strangers' hands. The bathhouse opened on the 48th day. Wayne didn't hold a ceremony. He simply posted the schedule on the fortress gate and announced it through the village elders. The children were the first to arrive. 12 of them. They were screaming and splashing. Half of them had never washed in hot water in their lives. Martha stood at the entrance and handed out soap, 1 bar per family. Sarana kept order. Then the women came. Then the men. By evening, 60 people had passed through the bathhouse. Wayne asked Sarana how many of the refugees had come. Sarana said all of them. Every single one. The locals were still cautious. The habit of washing in a trough at home is stronger than any decree. But in a week, they'll start coming too. Because a neighbor will return from the bathhouse clean and satisfied and will tell them. On the 50th day, what Wayne had both hoped for and feared happened. A horseman rode up to the fortress, alone, on a fine horse, wearing a cloak in the Imperial colors, a silver clasp on his chest, a bag bearing the coat of arms slung over his shoulder. An Imperial courier. Wayne went out to meet him on the porch. The courier dismounted. He held out a sealed scroll. He said the message was from Duke Crane's chancellery. Wayne broke the seal and read it. The text was brief. Duke Crane informs the governor of the province of Greywald of the appointment of an Imperial audit. The auditor will arrive in 20 days. Purpose of the audit: the use of Imperial resources, compliance of the governor's activities with Imperial law, suspicion of prohibited practices, signature, seal. Wayne read it twice. He folded the scroll. He invited the courier inside. He fed him. He gave him hot broth to drink. He provided a room for the night. The courier was surprised. He was used to being met with curses and empty tables in the northern provinces. Here it was warm, and food, and a clean room. He left in the morning. Wayne stood at the gate and watched as the courier disappeared down the southern road. 20 days. Duke Crane had heard the rumors. Too quickly. Someone had ratted him out. Wayne mentally ran through the possibilities. A merchant passing by. One of the refugees who spoke up at the market in Marehold. Or something simpler. Smugglers from the northern border. Rudd had switched sides, but Rudd had partners on the other side of the pass. Information leaks. Always. It's impossible to plug all the leaks in a small province. Wayne knew this from Zaozursk. There, too, it was impossible to sneeze without half the town finding out within an hour. He called a meeting. Greifald's first real meeting. Sarana, Halgar, Era, Bren, and Martha gathered in the office. Dietrich, Rudd, and Wayne spread the scroll out on the table and explained. In 20 days, an inspector from Duke Crane would arrive. The inspector would be looking for a reason to shut down the province, to remove Wayne, arrest him for illegal magic, or simply write a report that would allow Crane to send in troops. Wayne said this calmly, as if he were talking about a firewood delivery. Halgar asked what to do. Wayne replied that they should do the same as before. Work, build, feed, heal. But at the same time, prepare the paperwork. All of it. For every sack of grain, for every brick, for every oven, for every resident. The inspector will arrive and see order. Not a miracle, not magic. Order, papers, numbers, seals. An imperial bureaucrat speaks the language of paperwork, so they will speak his language. For the next 20 days, Wayne worked 18 hours a day. During the day, he built. The brick factory produced 300 bricks a day. The soap factory operated every other day. The bathhouse accommodated 80 people. The water supply reached Kalgarova Zaimka. The population reached 900. New refugees arrived every week. Wayne recorded each one. At night, he sat poring over papers. He compiled reports, inventories, registers, accounting records. Every resource received from the system, he recorded as having come from the governor's reserves. Formally, this was true. The warehouse belonged to the governor. Where the resources in the warehouse came from was a question not regulated by imperial law. Wayne checked. Catherine Ashwood hadn't arrived yet. He had to be his own lawyer. He reread all the imperial documents he'd found in the basement. He found the decree on the governor's powers. He found the tax code. He found a clause stating that a province could be exempt from taxes during the first year after a new governor's appointment if the population was under 1,000 people. Greywald's population was 900, so no taxes. Legal. Clean. He also found another clause, number 23, regarding the governor's right to mobilize local resources in the event of an emergency. Famine, plague, natural disaster. Wayne classified the current situation as chronic famine and an infrastructure crisis. He wrote a 7-page report, with figures, with tables, with a list of measures, with results. Every resolution is numbered and filed. Every census is certified by the village elders' signatures. Every expense was recorded. He didn't do this for the auditor. He did it because it was the right thing to do. Because every municipal official knows that paper is a shield. A decision without paper is arbitrariness. A decision with paper is the law. Sarana had been watching him for those 20 days. She saw how he worked. She saw that he slept no more than 4 hours. She saw that he ate on the go, that his hands shook with fatigue when he picked up a pen. On the 16th day, she came into his office in the evening. She set a bowl of hot soup in front of him, a mug of herbal tea, and a pair of warm boots. Wayne looked at the boots. His old ones were full of holes. He knew that, but hadn't paid it any mind. Too much to do. Serana said the boots had been made by a workshop, to his size, 43. She knew his size because she saw his footprints in the snow every day. Wayne looked at her. She wasn't smiling. She was angry, as always when she cared about someone. Anger was her way of not showing that she cared. Wayne put on the boots, warm, soft. They fit perfectly. He said thank you. Serana snorted and walked away. He watched her go and thought that in Zauzersk, no one had ever brought him boots. There, he bought everything for himself, cooked for himself, did his own laundry, fell asleep at the table with the monitor on, and woke up with a sore neck. Here, someone noticed that his boots had holes in them. Noticed and made new ones. Not because he asked, because they saw. The inspector arrived on the 21st day after the letter. A day late. His name was Heinrich Meister. Tall, thin, in an expensive fur-lined coat, glasses on a long nose, gloves, 2 assistants, and an escort of 4 soldiers. Wayne met him at the fortress gate. In person, in a clean doublet. Serana had done her best. She'd washed and mended it. Wayne invited the inspector inside. He showed him around the fortress, showed him the office, showed him the storeroom. Not all of it, just part of it. The part where the bricks and soap and tools were kept. Wayne kept the rest locked up. A precaution. Showed him the infirmary. Martha greeted the inspector silently, holding a cat in her arms. He showed him the barracks for the refugees. Clean, warm. The people stood up when the governor entered, not on orders, out of habit. He showed him the bathhouse. He showed him the brick factory. He showed him the soap factory. Inspector Meister walked and said nothing. The assistants took notes. The soldiers looked around. They were warm. They hadn't expected that. The North means cold and poverty. Everyone knows that. But here there was heated flooring in the fortress, and hot porridge in the communal kitchen, and children who didn't look like skeletons. Wayne led the inspector into the office. He placed a folder in front of him, a thick one, numbered, with a table of contents, all the resolutions, all the censuses, all the expense reports, all acceptance reports, everything. Meister opened the folder. He began to read. He read for a long time. The assistant stood behind him. Wayne sat across from him and waited, silently, patiently, just as he had waited in Zauzersk when the inspectors came from the regional center and spent 4 hours leafing through his reports. The method was the same. Hand over the papers. Wait. Don't make excuses. Don't explain. Let the documents speak for themselves. Meister read for an hour. Then he closed the folder, took off his glasses, wiped them, put them back on, looked at Wayne and said the documentation was in order, that the expenses were justified, that the tax exemption had been applied correctly. Then he put a glove on his right hand, took it off, put it back on. The gesture of a man preparing to say something unpleasant. He asked where a provincial governor with a 0 budget had found the resources for 80 furnaces, 300 meters of water pipes, a brick factory, a soap factory, a bathhouse, a medical station, and daily meals for 900 people. Wayne answered, calmly. The governor's reserves. The Astwald family inheritance. Invested in the province in accordance with paragraph 23 of the Imperial Code on Emergency Administration. Everything is documented. Sheet 14. Meister opened sheet 14. He read it. He closed it. He looked at Wayne. And Wayne saw something in his eyes he hadn't expected. Not suspicion, not anger, confusion. Meister was a bureaucrat. He knew the paperwork. He knew the law. And on paper and by the law, everything was in order. Impeccably so, as if whoever had done this knew imperial law better than the auditor himself. Meister couldn't write a negative report because there was nothing to find fault with. But he couldn't write a positive one either because Duke Crane would eat him alive for it. Wayne saw this trap. He saw a man caught between the millstones, and he quietly said that it was cold outside, that rooms had been prepared for the auditor and his men, warm ones, with stoves, with clean linens, that dinner would be in an hour, hot soup, fresh bread, and that the inspector could stay as long as necessary to write a complete and objective report. Meister stayed for 3 days. He ate, he slept, he kept warm. On the second day, he took off his gloves at the table for the first time. On the third day, he asked for seconds of porridge. As he was leaving, he stopped at the gate. He looked at Wayne. He said he would write a report, an objective one. Wayne nodded. Meister paused. Then he said he hadn't seen a province in many years that smelled of bread rather than fear. And he left. Wayne stood at the gate and watched him go. Behind him, white steam rose from the bathhouse chimney. Gray smoke rose from the soap factory's chimney. The smell of porridge wafted from the kitchen. The meowing of Martha the cat could be heard from the infirmary. Greifswald was alive. 2 months ago, this had been a graveyard. Now it was a town. Small, dirty, poor, but alive. And this was only the beginning. Meister had left, but silence had not fallen. Wayne knew that the inspector's objective report was not a salvation, but a reprieve. Crane would receive the document. He would read it. He would see that Greifswald was not dying, and he would send someone more serious. The question was not whether they would come. The question was when. Wayne gave himself 3 months, maybe 4. Winter still held the mountain passes and the southern roads. As long as the snow lay, the army couldn't move. That meant he was relatively safe until spring. That meant he had to make use of every day. On the 60th day, the population had surpassed 1,000. Refugees were coming in a steady stream, not in crowds, 2 or 3 families a week, from Merhold, from Kaiserten, from Durenfeld. They all told the same story. Grain prices are rising. The Duke is buying up the reserves. The barons are locking up their granaries. Anyone who doesn't pay is driven off their land. Wayne recorded every story. He was piecing together the picture. Crane was planning something big, not just a starvation blockade of a single province. He was tightening his grip on the throat of the entire northern wing of the empire. He was buying up grain to control food. Whoever controls food controls the people. Wayne knew that formula. In Zauzersk, it worked through the Housing and Utilities Department. Here, through sacks of barley. The essence was the same. He called a meeting. Now they were held every 3 days. The office was getting crowded. Sarana, Halgar, Era, Bren, Marta, Rudd, Dietrich. 8 people. Wayne laid out the situation. The refugees will be coming. There will be more and more of them. By spring, there could be 2,000 people. By summer, 3,000. Greifswald must be ready. We need housing. We need food. We need jobs for the new people. We need protection. Halgar asked what kind of protection. Wayne replied that once the province became large and wealthy enough, someone would want to take it over. Halgar said that Greifswald had never been rich. Wayne replied that in 6 months it would be, and that they needed to prepare for that now. He laid out the plan. 4 areas. First, construction. The brick factory was operating at full capacity, 400 bricks a day. Not enough. We need a second factory. We need bricklayers. Bren can't handle it alone. Wayne announced he was recruiting apprentices. 5 young men from among the refugees. Bren would teach them. Bren gave Wayne a stern look and said he was a bricklayer, not a babysitter. Wayne replied that in a month he'd have 5 pairs of hands capable of laying build walls without his supervision. Bren thought about it. Then he nodded. But he warned that if even one of them laid a brick crookedly, he would kick them all out. The second area, agriculture. Winter was still here, but spring would come in 4 months. They needed to prepare for sowing. Wayne wasn't an agronomist, but he knew the basics. The 3-field system, crop rotation, winter and spring crops. He requested seeds from the system: barley, rye, turnips, flax, peas, each crop separately, every bag labeled. Halgar looked at the bags of seeds and said nothing. Then he said quietly that nothing had been sown in Greywald for 20 years. The land was overgrown. There was no one to plow it. 3 horses for the entire province. Wayne replied that there would be more horses. He would request harnesses and plows from the system. They would have to buy horses in the south, or trade for them, for soap, for bricks, for salt. Greywald was starting to produce things that could be sold. This was the third direction: trade. Wayne understood that the system's endless resources were a trap. If he simply gave everything away for free, the province would become a parasite on a single source. Take away the system, and everything would collapse. A real economy was needed: production, exchange, profit. Soap from Greywald was coarse, but lathered better than the Imperial kind. The bricks were a bit crooked but sturdy. Wayne could supply salt in any quantity, and in the south, salt was expensive. He called for Rudd. He said he needed a trade caravan, the first in Greywald's history in 20 years. Rudd listened. His eyes gleamed. A smuggler by nature. Trade is just smuggling, only legal. Wayne said the caravan would go to Merhold. It would carry soap and salt. It would bring back horses and iron. Rudd asked how many men he had. Wayne said 3, Rudd and his 2 men, plus 2 refugees who knew the roads. 5 men, 2 sleighs, cargo, guards. Rudd shook his head and said 5 men weren't enough for the southern roads. Bandits. Wayne nodded. This led to the 4th direction: a militia. Wayne didn't want an army. An army is expensive. An army means people taken away from their work. An army is grounds for accusations of insurrection. He needed a militia. 20 men. Locals. Who knew the woods and the mountains. Armed. Trained. Not for war. To guard caravans. To patrol the borders. To defend the villages. He asked Sarana which of the men knew how to handle a weapon. Sarana named 7. Former hunters, former lumberjacks, 1 former soldier. Old, lame, but familiar with drill and discipline. His name was Court. He lost a leg in the Imperial campaign 10 years ago. He returned to Greywald to die. He didn't die. Too angry to die. Wayne found him in Lower Greywald, a small house on the outskirts. Court was sitting on the porch despite the frost, whittling a wooden spoon. 1 leg, a wooden prosthesis, strong hands, clear eyes. Wayne said he needed a man to teach 20 men the basics of drill and weapon handling. Court looked at him, asked what weapons. Wayne replied, spears, shields, bows, nothing complicated. Court asked who they were fighting against. Wayne answered honestly that he didn't know yet, but that it was better to be prepared and not need it than to need it and not be prepared. Court smiled. He stood up, hobbled into the house, came out with a short sword at his belt, said he'd be at the fortress at dawn tomorrow, and that if even 1 recruit, he would personally bury him in the snow up to his waist. A week later, the militia trained every morning. 22 men. 2 came on their own. As always, Court put them through their paces on the parade ground for 2 hours before breakfast. Formation, march, turns, spear thrusts, shield blocks, simple things, the basics. But after a month of training, 20 men standing in a line with spears and shields were no longer a crowd. They were a wall. Wayne watched from the fortress wall. He knew nothing about military affairs, but he knew about organization, and he could see that Court knew his stuff. On the 70th day, Liel Morvenna arrived in Greywald. She didn't come by the road. She emerged from the forest, alone, in a tattered cloak over a nun's habit, barefoot, in the snow. Martha found her by the fence of the infirmary in the morning, unconscious, with frost-bitten feet and a fever of nearly 40 degrees. Martha dragged her inside and didn't leave her side for 3 days. Wayne came every morning. He asked how she was doing. Martha replied that the girl was tough but exhausted to the limit, that someone had been driving her, for a long time, non-stop. On the 4th day, Liel opened her eyes. Wayne was sitting nearby. Not because he was waiting, because he'd come in to give Martha a report and had lingered. Liel looked at him, pale, thin. Her dark hair was scattered across the pillow. She asked where she was. Wayne replied that she was in Greywald, in the infirmary, that she was safe. Liel closed her eyes and began to cry. Quietly, soundlessly. Only tears. Wayne learned the story 2 days later when Liel was able to speak. She was a novice of the Order of the Silver Vine within the Church of Light, a healer, an herbalist, the best in her class. Her mentor, Sister Adelina, taught her what the order called forbidden practices, the use of herbs the Church considered witchcraft, making ointments without a prayer ritual, diagnosing by pulse rather than sacred texts. Adelina was arrested, tried, burned at the stake in the order's square. Liel, that very night. She walked north for 3 weeks, because no one searches in the north. There is nothing in the north. She was wrong. In the north was Greywald. Wayne listened in silence. Then he stood up. He left. He returned an hour later. He brought a warm dress, woolen stockings, boots, size 37. He had looked at her feet while she slept and estimated the size by eye. He guessed right. He placed everything on a chair next to the bed, and he brought one more thing, a key, a large one, made of iron. Liel looked at the key. Wayne explained. There is a room in the fortress, next to the infirmary, dry, warm, with shelves, with a window. He wants to turn it into a pharmacy, a real one, with a supply of herbs, with tools, with a place to work. He needs someone to run it, someone who knows more about healing than anyone else in the province. Liel looked at the key, then at Wayne, then back at the key. She was waiting for the catch. She'd been waiting for a catch her whole life. Everyone who was kind wanted something in return. She asked what he wanted from her. Wayne replied that he wanted people in Greywald to stop dying from diseases that could be cured, and that he needed someone to teach other girls the basics of medicine. Because one healer for every 1,000 people is a disaster, not a system. Liel was silent. Then she took the key. A week later, the pharmacy was up and running. Liel turned out to be exactly what Wayne had hoped for. A talent. Pure, unclouded talent. She knew herbs the way Bren knew stone, by touch, by smell, by taste. At first, Martha was wary of her. 2 healers under one roof meant a battle for patience. But Liel didn't fight. She went to Martha on the very first day and asked her to show her the local herbs, the ones not found in the south. Martha showed her. Liel took notes. She asked about dosages, storage methods, and interactions with southern concoctions. Martha talked for an hour, then 2. Then they brewed tea and talked until nightfall. By morning they were, if not friends, then allies. Wayne saw this and, relieved, crossed conflict at the medical station off his list of problems. Wayne requested from the system something he'd been thinking about for a long time. Lenses. Glass. Magnifying. He remembered the principle. A convex lens collects light. 2 lenses in a tube provide magnification. Leeuwenhoek's microscope. The simplest design. A single lens in a metal plate. He couldn't build a real microscope. He lacked knowledge of optics. But he could request a high-quality lens with high magnification. The system provided it. Round. Transparent. Thicker in the center, thinner at the edges. Wayne set it into a wooden frame. He brought it to Liel. He showed her how to use it. He focused it on a drop of water. Liel looked. She froze, then she raised her head, Her eyes were huge. She saw something no one in this world had ever seen before. A world inside a drop. Wayne told her that diseases are caused by tiny creatures that cannot be seen with the naked eye. That washing your hands kills some of them. That boiling water kills more. That this wasn't magic or heresy. It was knowledge. Leah listened. She didn't argue. She didn't doubt. She simply absorbed it, like dry earth absorbs water after a drought. On the 78th day, the first trade caravan set out. 5 people, 2 sleds, soap, salt, 10 bricks as a sample. Rudd led the way. Wayne gave him a list of what to bring back: horses, iron, cloth, ropes, and information. Find out what's happening in the South, what the prices are, what the rumors are, who's trading what. Rudd nodded and left. Wayne watched him go and thought he was sending 5 men into a world that wanted Greywald dead. But the caravan had to go, because the province couldn't survive in isolation, even with an endless warehouse. Connections were needed, information was needed, trade was needed. The caravan returned 12 days later, with 4 horses, with 3 barrels of iron ingots, with a roll of coarse cloth, and with news. Rudd sat down in front of Wayne and told him, "Things are bad in the South. Grain prices have tripled in 2 months. Duke Crane controls 3/4 of the grain market through front guilds. 2 barons from neighboring provinces have already sworn allegiance to him in exchange for food for their lands. The emperor is ill. They say he is dying. The Grand Council meets every week but makes no decisions. Everyone is waiting. Everyone is afraid. And everyone is whispering about Grey Valdi, about the province in the north where the governor is handing out stoves and feeding 1,000 people out of nowhere. The rumors are growing. Some say Wayne is a sorcerer. Others say he found silver in the old mines. Still others say he made a deal with demons. No one knows the truth. But everyone knows that Greywald is alive, and that frightens those who needed him dead." Wayne listened. He thanked Rudd. He let him go. He sat alone in his office. He looked at the map. Greywald, a tiny dot on the northern edge of the empire. Dozens of provinces all around, thousands of kilometers of roads, millions of people, and one duke who is slowly but surely bringing everything under his control. Wayne couldn't stop Crane. He couldn't interfere in high politics. He couldn't save the empire. He could do only one thing: build. Make his little province stronger, more resilient, richer. Day by day, brick by brick, person by person. And hope that when the storm reached his doorstep, the walls would be thick enough. The 80th day, winter had begun to retreat. Not all at once. The frost lingered, but at noon the sun warmed more intensely. Icicles appeared on the roofs for the first time in a month. Wayne stood on the wall and looked toward the horizon. The snow glistened so brightly it hurt his eyes. He thought about the land. In 2 months, the snow would melt. It would be time to plow. The 4 horses Rudd had brought were good, but for 40,000 hectares, they were nothing. He wasn't planning to plow 40,000. 500 would be enough to start with. 500 hectares of barley and wheat would feed 3,000 people for a year. If there was a harvest, if there was no drought, if there were no locusts. Too many ifs. But there are no other options. The system's endless warehouse is a safety net, not a strategy. That same day, a convoy arrived at the fortress. 8 people under guard. 4 soldiers in tattered Imperial uniforms. The convoy leader handed Wayne a piece of paper, an order from Duke Crane's office, a list of, quote, undesirable persons sent to the province of Greywald to serve their exile. Wayne read the names: 6 men, 2 women. Occupations: former clerk, former stablehand, former merchant, former laundress, former teacher, former quartermaster of the Imperial Supply Service. Wayne paused at the last name: Catherine Ashwood. He looked at the group of exiles. They were standing in the fortress courtyard, dirty, tired, frozen, but not broken. One woman stood out among them, auburn hair, glasses on a chain, 3 books pressed to her chest. Even after the convoy through the Imperial, she hadn't let go of the books. Wayne looked at her. She looked at him. In her eyes was an expression Wayne knew well. The expression of someone who expects the worst and is ready for it. Wayne dismissed the escort. He fed the convicts. He housed them in the barracks. He gave each of them warm clothes, blankets. A stove was already set up in the barracks. Then he went to see Catherine. She was sitting on the bunk reading one of her books, the Imperial Financial Code. Wayne sat down beside her. He asked why she had been exiled. Catherine replied in an even voice. She had been the quartermaster of the 3rd of the Southern District Supply Office. She had discovered forged grain invoices, 120,000 sacks that existed only on paper. The money went into Duke Crane's pocket through 3 front guilds. She refused to sign the report. She wrote a memorandum to the Imperial Audit Office. The memorandum never reached its destination. Catherine was arrested for negligence, stripped of her rank, exiled. Wayne listened. Then he nodded. He asked if she remembered the numbers on those invoices. Catherine looked at him, for the first time, with interest. She said she remembered all 120,000, not the numbers, the amounts, the dates, the names of the signatories, the delivery routes, everything. She had a perfect memory for numbers. Wayne stood up. He said he'd be waiting for her in his office tomorrow morning, that he had a job for her. Catherine asked what kind. Wayne replied that he needed an auditor, someone to check everything he does, every expense, every resolution, every decision. To find mistakes, to find weak spots, find what could be improved. Full authority, access to all documents, no restrictions. Catherine was silent. Then she asked why he needed this. Wayne replied that a good administrator isn't someone who never makes mistakes, but someone who knows about their mistakes before an auditor does. Catherine looked at him for a long time. Then she said that in 12 years of service, not a single boss had ever asked her to find his own mistakes. Usually, they asked her to hide other people's. Wayne shrugged and said he wasn't an ordinary boss. He was a municipal official, and municipal officials fear audits more than death. So it's better to check yourself. Catherine allowed herself a faint smile. In the morning, Catherine came into the office. Wayne laid all the folders out in front of her. All 9 resolutions, all the inventories, all the ledgers, all the reports. Catherine sat down. She opened the first folder. She began to read. An hour later, she looked up and said that resolution number 3 contained an error in the date. Wayne corrected it. 2 hours later, she said that the number of stoves issued in the second month's expense report didn't add up. 80, according to the inventory, but the household census listed 76. 4 stoves were missing. Wayne raised his eyebrows. He checked. She was right. 4 stoves had gone to the outermost houses of Zaimka, which he had forgotten to enter in the register. He corrected it. 4 hours later, Catherine closed the last folder. She looked at Wayne and said that overall, the documentation was better than that of half the Imperial offices. But there were 23 comments. Minor ones, formal ones. But an auditor 1 rank above a Meister would stumble over them. Wayne asked for the list. Catherine pulled a sheet of paper from her pocket. She had already written the list while she was reading. 23 items, in small, neat handwriting. Wayne realized he had found his person. Catherine was not just an auditor, she was a mirror. The kind of mirror that shows not what you want to see, but what is there. He appointed her Chief Financial Inspector of Greywald Province. Decree number 10. Catherine read the decree. She corrected 2 errors in it. She signed it. Wayne thought that working with her would not be easy, but it would be right. Over the next 2 weeks, Catherine turned the entire accounting system of Greywald. She implemented double-entry bookkeeping. Every income and expense was recorded twice. She created a standardized registry of residents: name, age, family, home, occupation, date of arrival, status, local or refugee. She numbered every house in the 3 villages, every plot of land, every building. She drew up a budget for the province, a real budget, with income and expenses. Income was still zero. Expenses were enormous, but now they were visible, on paper, in numbers. Wayne looked at the budget and saw a familiar picture. A deficit, dependence on a single source, zero diversification, just like in Zauzursk. Only in Zauzursk there was a federal budget and transfers, and here there was the system. The essence was the same. We need to get off the hook. On the 91st day, Wayne convened the first large gathering. Not a meeting in his office. A gathering in the square in front of the fortress. The entire population. 1,100 people. They stood on the trampled snow and looked at the governor. Wayne stood on the fortress porch. Sarana to his right, Halgar to his left. Catherine behind him with a notebook. Wayne spoke simply, without grandstanding, without promises. He said that winter was ending, that for 3 months Greywald had survived. Not a single person had frozen to death. Not a single child had died of hunger. He hadn't done it. They had done it. All of them together. Bren, who had set up 100 stoves. Sarana, who had organized every construction project. Halgar, who had brought the people. Era, who brought order. Martha and Liel, who healed. Rudd, who opened a trade route. Court, who teaches self-defense. Every woman who cooked porridge in the communal kitchen. Every man who dug a trench for the water line. Every child who brought an armful of firewood. Greywald lives because they decided to live. Then he said the most important thing. He said that in a week he would begin issuing personalized certificates of residency for Greywald. To every family. A sheet of paper with a seal. A name. Family composition. Home. Occupation. The governor's personal signature. For the locals, it's proof that they haven't been forgotten. For the refugees, it's the first document of their lives. A piece of paper that says they exist, that they have a name and a place, that they aren't vagabonds or beggars. They are residents of Greywald. Silence. A long one. Then someone in the crowd began to cry. An old man. Wayne didn't see who, but he heard. Then they clapped. Not right away. First one, then another, then everyone. Wayne stood on the porch and accepted the applause he didn't deserve. Because he had done what any normal official should have done. It's just that there hadn't been any normal ones around here for a very long time. It took 3 days to issue the certificates. Wayne signed each one personally. 1,100 of them. His hand went numb by the end of the first day. He didn't stop. Each family approached the table in the fortress. Wayne called out a name, read the details, handed over the certificate. He shook hands with the head of the family, with everyone, personally. Sarana stood nearby and handed out the certificates. Catherine kept the register. Liel kept order in the line. The children hid the certificates in their bosoms. The elderly read their names aloud, as if checking that they were real. One old woman, Gerda, the very one for whom Wayne had first installed a stove. She approached the table and stared at the certificate for a long time. Then she raised her head and said quietly that in 70 years of life, not a single person had ever written her name on paper. Wayne replied that he had just done so. Gerda nodded. She left. She hid the certificate under her coat, close to her heart. On the evening of the 3rd day, when the last certificate had been handed out, Wayne sat alone in his office. His hand wouldn't move. He placed it on the table and looked at his fingers. Ink-stained, calloused, someone else's. Not the fingers that had been tapping away at the keyboard in Zauzursk for 12 years. Different ones, thinner, longer, younger, but doing the same work. signatures, resolutions, decrees, an endless river of paper keeping 1,000 people afloat. He closed his eyes and for a second saw his old office, the monitor, the keyboard, a cup of coffee, a stack of folders. Then he opened his eyes and saw the map of Greywald on the wall. It wasn't all that different, only instead of a monitor, a candle. Instead of coffee, herbal tea. Instead of plastic folders, parchment. The essence is the same: people, numbers, responsibility. He smiled. He thought that perhaps his soul was made for this, for the drudgery that no one notices while it's being done, and everyone notices when it stops. There was a knock at the door. Lady Isabella von Reinhardt entered. He hadn't expected her. She had arrived 3 days ago with a small entourage, a carriage, 2 maids, a trunk of dresses, a letter from Count Reinhardt's father, in which he announced that he was sending his daughter to meet Governor Greywald for a matchmaking visit, as agreed. Wayne read the letter and realized there had been no agreement. Crane had set them both up. He ruined the Count's reputation and humiliated Wayne in one fell swoop, sending a beautiful aristocrat to a destitute northern backwater for a matchmaking meeting with an exiled baron. The perfect joke for the capital's salons. Isabella stood in the doorway, golden hair, straight back, a dress that cost more than all of Greywald a year ago, and her eyes, sad, cold, accustomed to smiling when inside they were empty. Wayne stood up. He invited her to sit. She sat down. She was silent. Wayne spoke first. He said he knew why she had been sent, that it wasn't his idea, that Duke Crane had used both her and her father, and that she had a choice. She could return home tomorrow morning, with an escort, in safety, or she could stay, on whatever terms she herself determined, not as a bride, not as a hostage, as a guest, or as a resident, whatever she wanted. It was up to her. Isabella was silent for a long time. Then she asked if it was true that he issued certificates to all residents. Wayne nodded. Isabella asked if she would receive if she stayed. Wayne said yes. Her name would be on the paper just like any other resident of Greywald. No more, no less. Isabella looked at him. She was searching for a lie, searching for a hidden motive, searching for what she was used to. She found nothing. She said she would think about it. Wayne nodded. She left. Wayne sat back down at the table and thought that in Zauzursk there were no such problems. In Zauzursk there were pipes and estimates and contractors, and here aristocratic ladies with unhappy eyes. He picked up his pen and returned to the budget. Isabella stayed. She didn't answer right away. For 3 days she walked around Greywald. She looked. She was silent. Her maids complained about the cold and the lack of mirrors. Isabella didn't complain. She observed. She saw the bathhouse and the children running out of it with wet hair and red cheeks. She saw the communal kitchen and the women laughing at the steam rising from the cauldron. She saw the infirmary and Leal bandaging the arm of a boy who had cut himself with an axe. She saw Serana commanding a crew of 12 men, and not a single one argued. On the 4th day, Isabella went to Wayne and said she was staying. Wayne nodded. He asked if she wanted a job. Isabella looked at him as if he were speaking an unfamiliar language. A job? The Count's daughter. A job? Wayne explained. In Greywald, every person is useful. She has an education. She reads in 3 languages. She knows etiquette. She knows the law. She knows diplomacy. He needed someone to correspond with other provinces, to draft official letters, to maintain the archives. Isabella was silent. Then she nodded. For the first time in 4 days, something other than longing flashed in her eyes. Curiosity. Spring arrived on the 100th day. The snow began to melt. Streams ran down the slopes. The earth was laid bare, black, rich, waiting. Wayne announced the start of fieldwork. It was the largest undertaking in the entire history of the new Greywald. 500 hectares needed to be plowed in a month. 4 horses, 6 plows, 80 workers. Wayne divided the fields into sections. He assigned each section to a work crew. Each crew received a plan. Serana supervised the field work. Halgar assigned the workers. Court and the militia guarded the perimeter. Bren and his students built barns for the future harvest. Leal prepared herbal ointments for blisters and burns. Catherine kept track of every hectare planted. Isabella drafted letters to neighboring barons with trade proposals. Wayne worked in the fields alongside everyone else. For the first week. Then Serana forbade it. Literally. She came to him while he was plowing and said that if the governor dropped dead from overwork, who would run the province? Wayne objected that he was fine. Serana replied that he wasn't fine, that he had dark circles under his eyes, that he'd lost 5 kilograms in 3 months, that Martha asks her every day when the governor will start sleeping more than 4 hours. Wayne wanted to argue. He looked at Serana. She stood before him with that very same angry expression that meant she cared. Dirty hands, a wheat-colored braid, gray eyes that wouldn't look away. He gave in. He returned to the fortress. He sat down at the table. He drew up a schedule for delegating authority. Serana is in charge of construction and field work. Halgar is in charge of personnel allocation. Catherine is in charge of finances and accounting. Liel is in charge of medicine. Isabella is in charge of diplomacy and the archives. Court is in charge of security. Rudd is in charge of trade and logistics. 7 people, 7 areas of responsibility. Wayne coordinates and makes strategic decisions. He doesn't do everything himself. He delegates, as he should have from the very beginning. But he couldn't, because for the first 3 months, there was no one to delegate to. On the 110th day, 2 events occurred. The first, the population reached 1,500. Refugees kept coming, in families, in groups, sometimes entire communities, from 12 provinces. Catherine registered everyone. Wayne signed certificates by the stack. His hand had grown accustomed to it. Serana was settling the new arrivals. The second barracks was overflowing. The third was under construction. Bren and his 5 apprentices worked around the clock. The brick factory was producing 1,000 bricks a day. 2 factories. Wayne had launched the second one on the eastern slope of the hill. New houses were springing up around the fortress. Not a village, already a city. Small, rough, but a city. The second event. Una So arrived. Or rather, Rudd brought her. He found her on his way back from Merhold. Small, skinny, round face, big dark eyes, 17 years old. She was sitting on the side of the road next to an overturned cart. The cart belonged to her father, a spice merchant from the eastern reaches of the empire. He had died 3 days earlier of a fever. Una was left alone on the road with a load of cinnamon and pepper, and not a single copper coin to her name. Rudd picked her up and brought her to Greywald. Wayne took her in like everyone else. Food, shelter, education. But Una wasn't like everyone else. On the second day, she went to Catherine's office and asked to look at the trade ledgers. Catherine gave them to her. Una sat down and read for 4 hours. Then she went to Wayne. She placed a sheet of paper in front of him. There were numbers on the sheet. 3 errors in the calculation of the trade balance for Rudd's caravan. The cost of horse feed was overstated by 1/3. The profit from soap sales was understated because Rudd hadn't accounted for the weight of the packaging. And the route through Merhold was suboptimal because the route through the Kelna Pass was 200 kilometers shorter and 3 days faster. Wayne looked at the sheet, then at Una, then back at the sheet. He asked how she knew about the Kelna Pass. Una replied that her father had crossed it 14 times, that she had kept his books since she was 13, and that a trade route was not a straight line, but a function of distance, feed costs, and the probability of robbery. Wayne blinked. Then he smiled. For the first time in a week, he appointed Una head of the Greywald Trade Office. Decree number 15. Serana said it was madness to put a 17-year-old girl in such a position. Wayne replied that it would be madness not to. Catherine added that Una's calculations were flawless and that she had double-checked them herself. Serana fell silent. Una got to work immediately. Within a week, she had reorganized the trade system. She compiled a catalog of goods that Greywald could export: soap, salt, bricks, glass, linen cloth, Liel's healing ointments. She calculated the optimal routes to the 6 nearest cities. She identified potential buyers. She set prices. Not too high and not too low. Just right. Rode looked at her plans and said that the girl knew trade better than he knew the forest. That was the highest from a smuggler. On the 120th day, Greywald earned money for the first time. Real money. Imperial silver marks. Rude brought back 32 marks from Kaisertan for a shipment of soap and salt. Catherine recorded the income, the first entry in the profit column. Wayne looked at the figure. 32 marks. On an Imperial scale, nothing. On a Greywald scale, a start. He asked Una to draw up a plan to increase revenue to 100 marks a month by fall. Una nodded and said that 100 marks wasn't enough. 200 was more realistic if they opened a route through Cologne and started supplying glass. Wayne asked why glass. Una replied that glass was light, expensive, takes up little space, the ideal commodity for a long route. Wayne requested materials for a glass workshop from the system: quartz sand, soda, lime, crucibles, tongs, blowing pipes. He knew the principle: melting at high temperatures, shaping, cooling. The details were hazy. But among the refugees there was a man, a glass blower from Durenfeld, an old master named Henrik. He lost his workshop when the Baron raised taxes. He came to Greywald with his wife and grandson. Wayne gave him materials and a place. Henrik built a furnace in 2 weeks. The first glass came out cloudy and bubbly. The second was better. The third was clear. By the 4th attempt, Henrik was making glasses and bottles. Not pretty, but functional. Glass was expensive in the Empire. In Greywald, it appeared out of nowhere. On the 130th day, the news Wayne had been waiting for arrived. Emperor Leopold VII had passed away. A courier brought a black ribbon and a decree of mourning. Wayne hung the ribbon on the fortress gates. He called a meeting. Faces were tense. Everyone understood that the emperor's death was not merely a change in power. It was the beginning of a redistribution of power. The Grand Council of the 12 Dukes would wage war for the throne. Crane no longer needed to hide. He could act openly, and the first thing he would do was remove those who stood in his way. And Greywald stood in his way. A small province in the north that had grown while everything around it was dying. An insult to a man who had built his power on the starvation of others. Wayne told the team that time was short, that they needed to be ready by fall. Ready for what exactly, he didn't know, but ready for anything. Court doubled the militia's training sessions, 40 men now, instead of 20. Wayne requested weapons from the system: spears, shields, bows, arrows, the simplest chainmail. Everything he could describe in enough detail. Serana was reinforcing the fortress walls. Bren was building a new wall around the expanded city. Not a high one, not a fortress wall, just a wall. Enough to hold off the cavalry for 10 minutes. Those 10 minutes would be enough to form ranks. Catherine was preparing documents. In case of a trial, in case of charges, in case of arrest. She knew Imperial law better than any lawyer in the capital, and prepared her defense on paper just as meticulously as Court prepared his defense on the battlefield. Isabella wrote 12 letters. To neighboring barons, to merchant guilds, even to 2 members of the Grand Council who were Crane's enemies. The letters were perfect, polite, restrained, without requests, just facts. Greywald is growing. Greywald trades. Greywald takes in refugees. Greywald is open to cooperation. Each letter was a weapon, not a sword, a calling card. Isabella knew how the aristocracy worked, how to read between the lines, how a single, well-crafted letter could stop an army. Wayne read all 12. He didn't correct a single word. He looked at Isabella and said she did it better than he could in a lifetime. Isabella replied that it was the only thing she had ever been taught, to write beautifully and to remain silent beautifully. Wayne said that writing beautifully was a weapon, and that she had just armed Greywald better than Court with his 40 spearmen. Isabella smiled. Her first real smile since arriving. Summer came to Greywald like an uninvited guest. The snow melted in 3 weeks. The earth warmed up. The fields turned green. Barley sprouted in neat rows. Rye was growing quickly. Peas clung with their tendrils to the stakes that Serana's crew had driven into the ground. Every morning, Wayne went out to the wall and looked out at the fields. Green swaths against the backdrop of black earth. 500 hectares. A year ago, nothing but weeds grew here. Now bread was growing here. Not a metaphor. Real bread that in 3 months could be harvested, ground, baked, and eaten. The population had surpassed 2,000. Refugees were now coming not in families, but in groups of 20 or 30. Entire communities. From different provinces, carpenters from Valheim, blacksmiths from Ehrenberg, fishermen from the Salzmere coast. Each brought a skill with them. Vane welcomed them all. Catherine registered them. Una assigned each a role in the province's economy. Serana settled them in. Bren built. A conveyor belt. Alive. Breathing. Working. The town surrounding the fortress could no longer be called a village. 160 new houses. Brick. With stoves. With chimneys. With glass windows from Henrik's workshop. The glass in the windows was what amazed every new refugee. In the Empire, only the rich had glass in their windows. In Greywald, everyone did. Because Henrik and his 3 apprentices made 40 window panes a week. Because Wayne believed that light in a house was not a luxury, but a necessity. People who live in dark houses get sick more often. Martha knew this. Liel knew this. Every public health doctor in Zauzursk knew this. Wayne simply carried this knowledge across the border between worlds. On the 150th day, he opened a school. Not a university, not yet. Just a school. A brick building for 20 children. A teacher was found among the exiles. The very one from the convoy that brought Catherine. His name was Martin. A former teacher at the Imperial Gymnasium. Fired for teaching peasant children alongside noble ones. Exiled for writing a complaint. Wayne gave him the building. Chalk, blackboards, paper, ink, books that didn't exist. Wayne requested textbooks from the system. The system wouldn't provide textbooks that Wayne couldn't describe, but he could describe the content. Arithmetic. He remembered the school curriculum. Literacy. He knew the Imperial language from muscle memory. The basics of natural science. He knew enough. Geography, from a map. History, from Imperial documents in the basement. The system provided paper and ink. Wayne wrote the first Greywald textbook in 3 nights. Clumsy, incomplete, but the first. Martin read it and said it was the best textbook he'd ever seen. Not because it was well written, because it was written for children. Not for examiners, for children. The school opened quietly. 20 children, 10 locals, 10 refugees. Martin taught them together, without separating them, to read, to write, to count. The children learned eagerly, like the hungry eat. Wayne came once a week, not to test them, to help. He told the children about numbers, about how to calculate how many bricks a house needs, how much grain is needed to feed a family through the winter, how much water the village uses in a day. The children listened, solved the problems. One boy, Tim, 11 years old, the son of a refugee from Merhold, the very one who had lived in the fortress basement during the first few weeks. He calculated faster than anyone else. The problems Wayne assigned for an hour, he solved in 10 minutes. Wayne noticed. He remembered. Every talent counts. On the 160th day, Una brought a contract from Kaisertan, Greywald's first real trade contract. The Kaisertan Soapmakers Guild was buying Greywald's soap in bulk, 200 bars a month, at a price half that of the local soap, but for Greywald, it was a huge sum. Katri calculated. With this volume plus glass, plus salt, plus linen cloth, by fall the province's income would total 250 marks a month, enough to buy what the system couldn't provide: horses, livestock, rare metals, specialized tools. Vane approved the contract. Una smiled so widely that her round face became almost a perfect circle. But summer brought not only harvest and trade. On the 170th day, a detachment from the Church of Light arrived in Greywald. 5 of them. 4 guards in white cloaks with a golden sun, and 1 inquisitor. Tall, thin, bald. Eyes like 2 nails driven into his skull. His name was Brother Moritz. He presented the church's warrant to investigate rumors of heretical practices in the province of Greywald, specifically a healer using forbidden methods, specifically Leal Morvenna. Wayne met him at the gate, calmly, invited him inside, fed him. It had become a tactic. First, warm and feed every guest. A hungry person is aggressive. A full person is ready to listen. Brother Moritz ate little. He drank only water. He looked around. Wayne saw how his eyes were counting people, houses, stoves, chimneys, windows, wealth. Moritz was looking for the source. Where did an exiled, impoverished province get all this? Wayne didn't wait for questions. He took Moritz on a tour, showed him everything: the brick factory, the soap factory, the glassworks, the school, the bathhouse, the communal kitchens, the water supply, the fields, the militia at training. He explained it all each time. Bricks made from local clay, soap made from ash and fat, glass made from sand and soda. No magic. Just work, just knowledge, just hands. Moritz listened. He was silent. He jotted things down in a little notebook. Then he asked about Leal. Wayne replied that Leal Morvenna is the senior healer at the Greywald Province Apothecary, that she was appointed by decree of the governor, that her methods are based on herbalism and observation, that she does not use magic, does not cast spells, does not perform rituals. She heals with herbs and knowledge. Moritz asked to see her. Wayne led him to the apothecary. Leal was standing at a table, grinding herbs in a mortar. She saw Moritz's white cloak and froze. She turned pale. Her hands began to shake. The mortar fell. Wayne stepped forward and stood between her and the Inquisitor. Not ostentatiously. He just stood there, like a wall. He said that the inspection of the apothecary would be conducted in his presence, and in the presence of the chief financial inspector. Catherine stepped out from behind the door. She had been standing there for 5 minutes already, with a notebook, with a quill, ready to write down every word. Moritz inspected the pharmacy, every shelf, every pot, every little bag. He sniffed, he felt, he wrote things down. Wayne stood nearby, Leal behind him, Catherine in the corner. Moritz finished an hour later. He turned to Wayne and said that 3 plants from the church's list of banned substances had been found in the pharmacy: mother and stepmother, belladonna, wormwood. Wayne replied that mother and is used for coughs, and that it is listed as permitted in the Imperial Pharmaceutical Register. Moritz said that the church's register differs from the Imperial one. Wayne said that the province is subject to Imperial law, not church law. Paragraph 41 of the Imperial Code: separation of jurisdictions. The church has the right to investigate within its jurisdiction. Medicine is not within the church's jurisdiction unless the practitioner is a member of a religious order. Leal Morvenna has left the order. She is a layperson. A layperson is subject to imperial law. Catherine nodded in confirmation and held up a copy of the paragraph. She had prepared it in advance. Moritz stood there, watching. He was not used to resistance. In villages and small towns, at the sight of a white cloak, people would fall to their knees and turn in anyone the Inquisitor asked for. Here, standing before him, was a skinny governor quoting legal paragraphs. Behind him, a healer. In the corner, a financial inspector with a ready reference to the law. Moritz said he would return, with authority. Wayne replied that he would be glad to see him, and that the guest room was still available. Moritz declined. He left that same day. After he left, Leal sat motionless in the pharmacy for 2 hours. Then she came to Wayne. She stood in the doorway. She was silent. Then she said that no one had ever stood between her and the man in the white cloak. That she was used to running. That for the first time, someone had ever told her she didn't need to run. Wayne replied that she didn't need to run because the law was on her side, and that as long as he was governor, no inquisitor would lay a finger on a single resident of his province without a ruling from the imperial court. Leal looked at him. Then she said quietly that he was a good man. Wayne shook his head and replied that he wasn't a good man. He was an official who knows the law. That's more reliable. Autumn of the first year. Harvest. 500 hectares yielded more than Wayne had expected. The barley yield was 20% above average, rye 15%, peas 30%. The land of Greywald, which no one had touched for 40 years, had rested and gathered strength. Wayne stood at the edge of the field and watched as Serana's crews gathered the ears of grain. 200 people in the field. The men were reaping. The women were binding the sheaves. The children were gathering fallen ears. Not a single grain should be wasted. Catherine had calculated it. 220 tons of grain. With a population of 2,500, that meant 5 months of self-sufficiency without the system's warehouse. Not a year, but 5 months. 6 months ago, it was 0. Progress that any agronomist would have called impossible for the first season on virgin land. Brenna's granaries were full. 3 stone buildings, dry, warm, ventilated through holes in the walls that Wayne had designed based on from his grain storage course. He remembered that grain rots from moisture, and that ventilation is more important than wall thickness. Brenna built it as instructed. The grain lay in even rows in sacks. Each sack was numbered by Catherine. Each was recorded in the register. Wayne forbade the release of grain without a written order bearing his signature. Not out of greed, out of calculation. 220 tons, at a consumption rate of 1.5 kilograms per person per day, is 147 days. Every sack issued without being accounted for is a day that someone won't have enough to eat in the winter. Una brought the results of the fall trade. 600 marks in 3 months, twice the target. Soap was selling great, glass even better. Greywald glasses had become fashionable in Kaisertan. Innkeepers and minor nobles were buying them, not for the quality, for the price. 3 times cheaper than Imperial ones. Henrik and his apprentices couldn't keep up. Wayne approved the expansion of the workshop, a 3rd for glass, a 4th apprentice. Una was already planning new routes, through Cologne to the west, through Valheim to the south, along the coast to the east. 3 directions. 3 caravans a month. Greywald was turning into a trading hub, small, northern, but noticeable. On the 190th day, the population reached 3,000. The town surrounding the fortress now had streets, real streets with names. Wayne named them himself. Stovemaker's Street, where the first houses to receive potbelly stoves stood. Watermain Street, along which the first pipe ran. Literacy Square, where he issued documents. Serana said the names were boring. Wayne replied that names should be understandable, not pretty. Serana snorted. But the street where she lived was named Brigade Street, and she didn't object. Catherine presented the annual report. Revenues, expenses, balance sheet, demographics, infrastructure. 40 pages. Printed on paper from the workshop Wayne had opened a month ago. Yes, Grevald now had a paper workshop. Small, handmade. The paper was rough, but it was their own. Wayne knew the process. Grinding wood, cooking the pulp, pressing, drying, the simplest method. Chinese, 1,000 years old. But for a world where paper cost as much as silver, it was a revelation. Catherine adored that workshop. Finally, there was enough paper for all her ledgers. Wayne read the report in the evening, alone, in his study. A candle, silence, numbers, his element. Population 3,112, 408 houses, 7 factories, a soap factory, a glassworks, 2 brick factories, a paper workshop, a textile workshop, a smithy opened by a refugee from Ehrenberg, 1 school, 38 students, 1 medical clinic, 1 pharmacy, 2 bathhouses. The second one was built a month ago in the new district. The water supply covers 80% of the houses, 52 people in the militia, 600 marks in trade turnover per quarter, 5 months' worth of grain reserves, livestock, 12 horses, 30 cows, 100 chickens. The beginnings of animal husbandry. Wayne looked at the numbers and saw the city, not on paper, in his mind. Every number was a face. A stove for the Myra family, boots for Serana, glasses for Catherine. He'd requested them from the system a month ago. -4. Catherine put them on and, for the first time, stopped squinting over the reports. A lens for Liel, uniforms for Brenna, abacus for Una, feathers for Isabella. Every item is personalized, each for a specific person. On the 200th day, Wayne began to think about winter, the second winter. They had survived the first on sheer enthusiasm and an endless warehouse. The second one would be different. 3,000 people is not 800. The scale is different. Mistakes cost more. He drew up a plan to prepare for winter. 20 points. A supply of firewood for every house. Checking the stoves, insulating the houses. Food supplies, medical supplies, winter clothing, winter footwear, clearing the roads, patrolling the borders. Each item was broken down by day, by person in charge, by resources. Serana received her copy and said it was the longest document she'd ever seen in her life. Wayne replied that in Zauzersk, the winter preparation plan was 120 pages long. Serana looked at him and asked for the first time what Zauzersk was. Wayne paused. Then he said it was the place where he had learned everything he knew. Far away, cold, very much like Grewald. Serana didn't ask any questions, but she remembered the word, Zauzersk. On the 210th day, news arrived brought by Rudd from his latest trading voyage. Duke Crane had declared himself regent of the empire. The Grand Council had not approved him unanimously, but 7 of the 12 dukes had supported him. The remaining 5 formed the opposition. The empire was split. Not yet at war, for now, but the rift ran through every province. Every baron chose a side. Some with Crane, some against, some waiting to see. Wayne listened and asked Rudd what people were saying about Grewald. Rudd replied that opinions varied, that in Kaisertan he was considered an eccentric, in Merhold a savior, in the capital a threat. Wayne personally mentioned Grewald at the council meeting. He called the province a hotbed of fugitives and heretics. He demanded an investigation. 5 dukes from the opposition blocked the demand, for now. But this, for now, could end any day. Wayne sat down at the table and thought for 3 hours. Then he called everyone in. Saran, Halgar, Catherine, Una, Liel, Isabella, Court, Ruda, Brenna, Dietrich, Martha, Martin, 12 people. His council. He told them everything. About Crane, about the regency, about the schism, about the threat. Then he fell silent and listened. Everyone spoke. Court said that 50 militiamen wouldn't hold the city against a real army. We need 100. We need walls. We need supplies. Sarana said that walls were being built but slowly, and that it was impossible to build in winter. Catherine said that legally, Greywald was untouchable as long as Wayne was governor, but that the regent could revoke the appointment with a single decree. Una said that trade would provide better protection than walls because if Greywald stopped supplying soap and glass to Kaisertan, the Kaisertan Guild would pressure its duke to protect the supplier. Isabella said that 3 barons from neighboring provinces had responded positively to her letters, and that one was ready to negotiate a military alliance. Liel was silent. Then she said quietly that the church would send not 1 inquisitor, but 10, and that next time they would come not with a mandate, but with torches. Wayne listened. He nodded. He took notes. When everyone had spoken, he stood up and said one thing. He said that Greywald would not go to war, would not attack, would not provoke. Greywald would build, every day, every hour, walls and houses and schools and workshops. Greywald would welcome anyone who came seeking help. Greywald would trade with anyone who wanted to trade. And when those who wanted to destroy it came, they would not see a fortress or an army. They will see a city where 3,000 people live better than in any other province of the empire. And these people cannot be defeated. Not because they are strong, because they have something to lose. And those who have something to lose fight to the death. Silence. Then Halgar, old, sullen Halgar, who 3 months ago had looked at Wayne as if he were already dead. Halgar stood up and said one word. Agreed. Then Sarana. I agree. Bren. He nodded silently, which for Bren meant complete and unconditional support. One by one, all 12. Wayne looked at them. 12 people. A year ago, strangers. Now his counsel, his support, his Greywald. He nodded. He said the meeting was over and that tomorrow morning everyone would return to their work. Because the walls won't build themselves, and the grain won't be harvested on its own, and the children won't learn to read on their own. The work continues, as always. That night, for the first time in a long while, he went out onto the wall alone. He stood and looked at the city, his city. Lights in the windows, smoke from the chimneys, 3,000 lives that depend on his decisions, on his knowledge, on his ability not to break. He thought of Crane, about Moritz, about the war that was raging, about the winter that was also coming, about the mines he hadn't yet explored, about the secret his maternal grandfather had kept, about the system that had given him everything and could take it all away in a single second. The wind carried the scent of smoke and fresh bread. Somewhere below, a child laughed. Wayne stood there for another minute. Then he went downstairs, sat down at the table, picked up a quill, opened a new sheet of paper, and began to write the defense plan for Greywald. Point 1. Fortify the western wall. Point 2. Create a 6-month food reserve. Point 3. The quill scratched across the paper. The candle burned steadily. Outside the window, the city was falling asleep. Greywald's first year was drawing to a close. The second year promised to be harder. Wayne knew it, and he was ready. Winter came like an old enemy, familiar, merciless. But this time, Greywald was ready. 3,000 people met the first frost in warm homes with full granaries. Wayne stood on the wall and watched as snow blanketed the fields. Empty fields, harvested down to the last ear of grain. Barns locked, stoves lit, water pipes insulated, straw wrapped around every exposed section of pipe. He remembered how the pipes burst every January in Zauzersk and swore to himself that it wouldn't happen in Greywald.
So far,
It hadn't. Bren checked the pipes every morning, personally. He didn't need to be ordered. He just went, tapped on the pipes, listened. If the sound changed, it meant an ice plug had formed somewhere. Bren knew the pipes as well as Wayne knew the budgets, by ear. On the 230th day, the first attack came. Not with an army, quietly, at night, 3 of them. They climbed over the western wall, which wasn't finished yet. They slipped past Court's patrols. 1 carried a crossbow, 2 carried short swords. Professionals, not highwaymen, mercenaries. They were heading for the fortress, for Wayne's office. The window was lit. He was working past midnight as usual. It wasn't a patrol that stopped them. It was a dog named Grizz, whom Serana had picked up a month ago. A healthy, shaggy male of unknown breed. He was sleeping by the fortress gate and woke up when the shadows passed by. He didn't bark. He growled, quietly, low. So the crossbowman's hand wavered. The bolt struck the wall a hand's breadth to the left of the window. The sound of the impact woke Court. Court was sleeping in the guardhouse fully clothed, an old soldier's habit. 30 seconds later, he was in the courtyard with his sword. A minute later, 4 militiamen arrived. The fight was brief. 1 mercenary was killed. The second was wounded. The third ran over the wall and vanished into the woods. Wayne came out of his office when it was all over. He looked at the bolt in the wall. A hand's breadth from his head. His hand wasn't shaking. Strange. He'd expected to be afraid, but there was no fear. There was anger, cold, quiet, bureaucratic. The same kind of anger he felt when a contractor laid asphalt in the rain. Not rage, but a statement of fact. Someone is doing things wrong, and it needs to be fixed. Court interrogated the wounded mercenary, not through torture. Leal bandaged his wound. Marta gave him painkillers. Then Court sat down next to him and calmly asked who had sent him. The mercenary remained silent for an hour. Then he spoke. Not because he had broken down, because he was warm. Because his wound had been bandaged. Because they gave him water. He was used to interrogations in cold basements, but here was a room with a stove and a girl who had tended to his wound. He said 3 words. The Greycloaks. Wayne had heard that name from the documents in the basement, from Rude's stories. The Greycloaks, Duke Crane's mercenaries, cleaners, assassins in travelers' cloaks. Their commander, Sir Raynar Wolfe, a name spoken in whispers even in the capital. Wayne called an emergency meeting. Night, candles, faces in the semi-darkness. He laid out the facts. Crane had moved from paper threats to physical ones. There would be more assassination attempts, or worse. Court said the wall needed to be finished within a month. Wayne agreed. Serana said that building in winter was difficult, but possible if they transferred people from the soap factory. Catherine calculated the losses from shutting down the soap factory. Una said she had a 2-month supply of soap and that halting production wasn't critical. Wayne approved. The wall was the priority. Bren nodded and left. By morning, he was already at the western section with 12 masons. The wall was completed in 22 days. Not a fortress wall, a city wall. 2 meters high, stone and brick, with 3 gates, with watchtowers at every corner. Wayne designed the towers himself, simple, wooden, with a roof to keep out the snow and rain, sufficient for the sentry to see the approaches from all 4 sides. Court set up the posts. 24-hour watch, 3 shifts. Grizz now slept not at the gate but in the tower. He chose the spot himself. A smart dog. On the 200th day, Wayne went down into the mines for the first time. He had put it off for a whole year. There was too much to do on the surface, but after the assassination attempt, something had changed. The system pulsed quietly in his mind. His managerial intuition told him that the answers were down below, not up top. He grabbed a lantern. He asked the system for a rope and a pickaxe. He called for Serana. She was the only one he wanted by his side. Not because she was the strongest, because he trusted her completely, unreservedly. She came with an axe at her belt and a torch in her hand. She asked why they were going into the mines. Wayne replied that they needed to check it out. Serana didn't ask what exactly. She just walked alongside him. The entrance to the mine was behind the fortress, on the northern slope, blocked with rocks, sealed. Wayne knew from documents that his maternal grandfather had closed the mines 40 years ago. The official reason? The silver had run out. The unofficial reason? Unknown. But the system hadn't chosen Greywald by chance. And his grandfather hadn't closed the mines by chance. Two coincidences in one place is a pattern. They cleared the rubble in 2 hours. Wayne worked in silence, Serana too. The stones were heavy, stacked deliberately. Not a collapse, a masonry wall. Someone had deliberately walled up the entrance. When the last stone fell, they saw a passage. Low, narrow, dark. A chill emanated from the depths. Not the winter cold from the surface. Something else. Deep. Eternal. They walked for 20 minutes. The tunnel sloped downward, gently. The walls were smooth, too smooth for a mine. Serana touched the wall and said the stone was warm. Wayne touched it too. Indeed, warm. As if something inside the mountain was heating it. They reached a fork. 3 tunnels. Veins stopped. The system pulsed, stronger than above. The golden window opened before their eyes on its own, without a prompt, for the first time. One word on the screen. Deeper. Wayne looked at Serana. She was looking at him. She didn't see the golden window. No one else did either. He said they should take the left tunnel. Serana asked why. Wayne honestly replied that he just felt it. Serana snorted, but she followed. The left tunnel led them into a cave, a large one. The ceiling was lost in the darkness. Serana's torch illuminated only the immediate edge, but even in that light, Wayne saw. The cave walls glistened, silver, unmined, not exhausted. Veins as thick as an arm ran through the rock from floor to ceiling. The silver hadn't run out. They'd simply stopped mining it. Grandfather had sealed the mine with the veins still full. Serana exhaled. She said quietly that there was enough silver here for 10 generations. Wayne nodded. But he wasn't looking at the silver. He was looking further, into the depths of the cave. There was something else there, something that glowed with its own light, faint, bluish. They moved closer, and they saw a door, a stone door, sealed, with symbols Wayne didn't recognize, but the system did. The golden window flashed brighter than ever, an inscription, "The Legacy of the Keepers, access blocked, key required." Wayne stood before the door and felt the system humming inside his head, like a taut string. Here. It all started here, and it will all end here. He didn't open the door. Not now. Not today. He turned to Serana and said they were leaving. Serana looked at the door, at the symbols, at the blue light. She asked what it was. Wayne replied that he didn't know yet, but he would find out. Serana nodded. They went back upstairs. They blocked the entrance again. Wayne asked Serana not to tell anyone. Serana replied that she wouldn't, but that she wanted to know when he would come back down. Wayne said he would come back, when he was ready. The winter of the second year was different. Not easier, different. The first winter, Wayne had been surviving. The second winter, he was building. The population had reached 4,000 and was still growing. New people arrived every week. Not just refugees anymore, artisans, craftsmen, people who had heard that in Greywald there was work and food and a just governor, and who left their homes of long standing of their own free will. A blacksmith from Valheim brought 2 apprentices and a full set of tools with him. A weaver from Durenfeld carried a loom on her back. A carpenter from Ehrenberg arrived with his family of 7 and said he was ready to build anything if his children could go to school. Wayne enrolled him, gave him a house, gave him a school, gave him a job. The carpenter wept. A 40-year-old man stood before the gaunt governor and wept because his children had been told they could learn. Martin's school was overflowing. 38 students became 60, then 80. One building wasn't enough. Wayne built a second, then a third. Not schools, classrooms. Separate rooms in brick houses converted for learning. Martin couldn't manage alone. Wayne found him helpers. 2 women from among the refugees who could read and write. They weren't teachers, but they knew how to explain things. And Martin knew how to design a curriculum. They worked together. Wayne added a new subject to the schedule: crafts. Every child over 10 learned not only reading, writing, and arithmetic, but also a trade. The boys went to Brennan's construction site, to Henrik's glassworks, to the blacksmith. The girls went to Liel at the pharmacy, to the weaver, to Una at the trading office. Theory without practice is empty. Practice without theory is blindness. Wayne said this at every meeting until everyone had memorized it. Tim, the boy from the basement. He had turned 12. He could calculate faster than adults. He solved problems that Wayne devised especially for him. Once, Wayne gave him a problem: to calculate how many bricks were needed to build a wall 500 meters long, 3 meters high, and 2 bricks thick. Tim solved it in 4 minutes. Correct. Taking into account the mortar between the bricks. Wayne hadn't told him about the mortar. Tim figured it out on his own. Wayne looked at the boy and saw a future engineer. Greywald's first engineer. One he would raise himself. Because engineers aren't sent from the capital. They're raised right here. On the 280th day, a delegation arrived in Greywald. Not from Crane. From Baron Erhard von Waltz, the neighboring province of Holmgard, one of the 3 barons who had replied to Isabella's letters. The delegation consisted of 5 people: the baron's advisor, 2 guards, a scribe, and the baron himself, in person. Wayne hadn't expected that. Barons don't visit exiled governors. It's beneath their dignity. So Erhard hadn't come out of politeness, out of necessity. Wayne received him according to protocol. Isabella had prepared everything: an honor guard of court militia, a spotless fortress, a set table, hot food, wine that Una had brought from Kaisertan specifically for such occasions. Baron Erhard turned out to be a short, stocky man in his 50s, a red beard, intelligent eyes, nervous hands. He entered the fortress and stopped. He looked around, at the warm floor, at the glass windows, at the bookshelves in Wayne's study, at the map on the wall pinned with pins, at the stack of decrees, at Catherine, who nodded at him from behind the desk without stopping her work. Erhard turned to Wayne and said that he had expected to see a frozen hole, but had seen a city instead. Wayne replied that it wasn't a city yet, just a settlement for now. It would be a city in a year. They talked for 6 hours. Wayne and Erhard, one-on-one, behind closed doors. Wayne told him everything, almost everything, about bricks, about soap, about glass, about the school, about trade. He didn't mention the system. He didn't mention the mines. Erhard listened. Then he told his story. Holmgard is starving. Crane has cut off grain supplies. The Baron cannot feed his 12,000 subjects this winter. He needs food, or an ally who could provide it. He hadn't come to trade, he'd come to ask. Wayne looked at him. He saw a man on the brink, a baron, an aristocrat, a man of pride and honor, who had come to an exiled official to ask for bread for his people. That was worth more than any treaty. Wayne offered terms. Greywald would supply Holmgard with grain, 3 tons a month, from the system's reserves. Wayne could afford it. In exchange, Holmgard would open a route through its territory, a direct path south, half as long as the route through Merhold. Plus, Holmgard would provide 20 soldiers for joint border patrols. Erhard thought for a moment. Then he extended his hand. They sealed the deal with a handshake. Isabella drew up the treaty in triplicate. Catherine authenticated the signatures. Una calculated the logistics of the shipments. The first grain caravan for Holmgard 2 days later. Rudd led the way. 10 sleds, 3 tons of grain, 20 sacks of salt, 50 bars of soap as a gift. Baron Erhard left with moist eyes. He wasn't crying. He was a baron. But his eyes were moist. A month later, a second baron arrived. From Cologne. Then a third. From Valheim. Then an envoy from the free city of Altmar. Then a representative of the Kaisertan Merchants Guild. All with the same story. Hunger. Need. A request. Vane received each one, fed them, listened, offered terms. Grain in exchange for roads, soap in exchange for iron, glass in exchange for horses, salt in exchange for cloth. Every agreement expanded Greywald's trade network. Every ally strengthened their position. Una calculated. Catherine processed the paperwork. Isabella wrote. Serana organized the shipments. Rudd transported them. A conveyor belt. Alive, working, growing. By the 300th day, Vane controlled trade routes in 4 directions. South through Holmgard, west through Kelna, east through Valheim, to the southwest through Altmar. Greywald became a hub, a point through which goods passed. Grain, soap, salt, glass, brick, flax, medicinal ointments, paper. Every commodity created a connection. Every connection created a dependency. Not a slave-like one, a market-based one. If Greywald stopped supplying soap, 4 provinces would be left without hygiene. If it stopped supplying grain, 3 provinces would starve. It was a defense. Better than any wall. Better than any army. An economic network in which Greywald was the only node that could not be removed without the entire structure collapsing. Una explained this to Wayne in the evenings. She would come over with a notebook. She would draw diagrams, nodes and lines. Wayne watched and saw a map of Zauzursk, heating networks, water supply nodes, electrical substations. The essence was the same, infrastructure, only instead of pipes, trade routes, instead of water, grain, instead of electricity, soap. Una spoke quickly. She counted aloud. Her eyes sparkled. She had grown over these months. Not physically. She was still small and round-faced. She had grown inside. From a frightened 17-year-old orphan, she had become the chief merchant of the northern wing of the empire. Rudd said the future belonged to her. Wayne agreed. On the 320th day, Wayne received a letter. Not from the Baron, not from the Guild. From Sir Raynar Wolf, commander of the Grey Cloaks, personally. The letter was short. Raynar wrote that the 3 mercenaries he had sent to Greywald were a test, that a failed test told him more than a successful one, that Governor Astwald had piqued his interest, and that next time he would come himself, without crossbows, with an offer. Wayne read the letter 3 times. Then he burned it. Then he sat and thought for an hour. Raynar Wolf, a professional, smart, dangerous, not a fanatic of Crane, a mercenary, serves for money, which means he can be negotiated with, or bribed, or persuaded. Wayne didn't know how, but he knew there would be a meeting, and that he needed to be ready for it. Spring of the 2nd year, population 5,000, a number that a year ago had seemed impossible. The town surrounding the fortress now covered an area 4 times larger than the fortress itself. 6 streets, 2 squares, a market. A real market, with stalls and awnings where people traded every day. Not just the people of Greywald. Merchants from Holmgard, Cologne, and Altmar. They brought what Greywald didn't produce: spices, wine, fine fabrics. We exported soap and glass and bricks. Una stood in the market every morning and kept an eye on the prices. She knew the value of every commodity in the 6 provinces and wouldn't let anyone jack up prices on her turf. The merchants respected her. Some feared her. A 17-year-old girl with a round face and an abacus in her hands, who could calculate any deal faster than 2 grown men combined. On the 350th day, Raynar Wolf kept his word. He came himself, not in secret, out in the open, through the main gate, alone, unarmed, tall, slightly tanned, a gray cloak without insignia, a face carved from stone, calm eyes. The eyes of a man who had seen so many deaths that he had stopped counting them. Court recognized him from the tower. He sent for Wayne. Wayne went out to the gate. They met in the middle of the courtyard. Raynar looked at Wayne. Wayne looked at Raynar. 2 men who were not supposed to stand facing each other peacefully. One, a killer, the other, a bureaucrat. But there they stood. Wayne invited him inside. Raynar accepted. He sat down in the office. He looked around. He saw a map, decrees, lists, the budget on the wall, Catherine's charts, Una's trade routes, Martin's school schedule. He was silent for a minute. Then he said that in 15 years he had seen many fortresses from the inside, but none of them resembled an office. Wayne replied that this was the office, the most dangerous weapon in the world. Raynar smirked, his first emotion. They talked for 4 hours. Raynar spoke bluntly, no diplomacy. He's a mercenary, not a politician. Crane had hired him to eliminate Wayne. The contract was still in effect. But Raynar was a professional, and a professional assesses risks. The risk of storming Greywald had increased 100-fold over the past year. The wall, the militia, the allies, trade ties, a city defended by 5,000 people who have something to lose. Raynar wasn't used to working at a loss. A storming would be costly. The losses would be heavy. The outcome was not guaranteed. Crane paid well, but not that well. Wayne and calculated. Not money. Motivation. Raynar wasn't offering an alliance. He was offering a renegotiation of terms. He needed something Crane couldn't give. Wayne asked directly, "What does Raynar want?" Raynar looked at him for a long time. Then he said one word: peace. Wayne blinked. Peace. A mercenary, an assassin, the commander of a hit squad. He wants peace, Raynar explained. He's 42. For 15 years, he's been killing people for hire. The Grey Cloaks are a tool, an effective one, but tools wear out. His men are tired. He's tired. He has no home, no family, no land, only the next contract, and the next, and the next. He had seen Greywald, seen people building homes and raising children and baking bread, and for the first time in 15 years, he thought that maybe there was something besides contracts. Wayne listened. Then he asked how many men Raynar had. 30. Raynar, experienced fighters, with horses and weapons. Wayne thought. 30 professional soldiers is more than his entire militia. If added to the people of court, Greywald would become a serious military force. But they're mercenaries, people who kill for money. Could they be trusted? Wayne looked at Raynar, at his calm, weary eyes, and he made a decision. He made an offer. Raynar and his men would receive land in Greywald, homes, work, the status of a provincial garrison, officially, by decree, with personal charters. In exchange, Raynar would terminate his contract with Crane and swear allegiance to the province. Not to Wayne, to the province, to the land, to the people. Raynar was silent for 3 minutes, an eternity. Then he asked one thing. He asked if there would be hot meals. Vane replied that there would be 3 a day. Raynar stood up. He held out his hand. Vane shook it, firmly. Raynar left. A week later, 30 horsemen in gray cloaks stood at the gates of Greywald, unarmed, with empty hands. Wayne went out to meet them. He handed out the letters, to each one personally. Raynar was last. He took the paper, read his name, looked at Wayne, and smiled for the first time, briefly, as if his face had forgotten how to do it. Crane learned of Raynar's betrayal 2 weeks later. The reaction was immediate. The regent's decree. The province of Greywald was declared a rebellious territory. Governor Wayne Astwald was stripped of his authority. All the province's property was confiscated in favor of the crown. A punitive expedition under the command of General Bruno von Steiner. 500 soldiers, cavalry, infantry, siege engines. Wayne read the decree, folded it, set it on the table, looked at his hands. The system was silent. It hadn't vanished. It was silent. He could still feel it, which meant the regent's decree had no legal force. The regent is not the emperor. The regent cannot strip the governor of his powers without a decision by the Grand Council. And the council is divided. 5 dukes against Crane. Catherine confirmed it in 5 minutes. The decree is illegal. Formally, Wayne is still the governor. Formally, the system is functioning. But 500 soldiers on the march aren't interested in formalities. Wayne convened a council, all 12 of them, plus Raynar, 13. He spread out the map. Steiner is coming from the south, through Home Guard. Baron Erhard won't be able to stop him. 12,000 civilians against 500 soldiers. That's not a battle, it's a massacre. Erhard will let him through. He has no choice. So Steiner will be at the walls of Greywald in 3 weeks. Raynar studied the map. He said that storming the wall would take Steiner a day, maybe 2. The wall is sturdy but not fortified. It won't hold up against siege engines. Court added that his militia and Raynar's men together make 90 fighters, against 500. A 1-to-5 ratio, tolerable on defense. If there are walls. If the walls fall, it's the end. Sarana said the population needed to be evacuated. Women, children, the elderly, to the mountains, to the forests. Vane shook his head. He said no one would leave. 5,000 people in the mountains in winter would die faster than in an assault. They would stay. Everyone. And they will win. Not with swords. He unfolded the plan. Not a military one. An infrastructure plan. Point 1. Reinforce the wall. Double the thickness on the western section. Flood the foundation with water. The water will freeze and create an icy shell. Wayne remembered this method. Russian fortresses. The ice rampart. The simplest method. Point 2. Supplies. Move all food into the fortress. The fortress stands on a cliff. You can't take it with battering rams. Point 3. Traps. On the approaches to the city. Wolf pits, catapults, icy slopes. Cavalry won't be able to cross the ice. Point 4. Burning oil on the walls. Boiling water. Stones. Classic defense tactics. Vane didn't invent anything new. He took what had worked for centuries and applied it systematically. Point 5. An underground passage. From the fortress to the mine. From the mine to the forest. In case things went wrong. An evacuation route for women and children. Not for retreat. For rescue. 3 weeks. 21 days. Greywald worked harder than ever. Every man, every hour. Bren and all his masons reinforced the wall. Sarana organized the watering of the ice rampart. The women carried water. The men dug pits. Court and Raynar trained the fighters together. An old, lame veteran and a former assassin. They weren't friends, but they respected each other. Court taught drill. Raynar taught tactics. Leal prepared the first aid station. Martha brewed pain-relieving potions. Catherine hid documents in waterproof chests. Una sent caravans in all 4 directions with a single message. Greywald is under threat. Isabella wrote 12 letters to everyone who had ever traded with Greywald. to everyone who received its grain, to everyone who bought its soap. The same message. Greywald is under threat. If Greywald falls, you will lose your only source of grain in the north. Act. Wayne worked. 20 hours a day. He didn't sleep. He couldn't. Serana brought him food. He ate at the table without looking at his plate, eyes on the map, hands on the documents, head in calculations. Serana stood nearby and said nothing. On the 18th day, she did something she had never done before. She placed her hand on his shoulder. Just placed it there, silently. Wayne looked up. He looked at her. Serana didn't look away. Gray, angry. Wayne covered her hand with his for a second. Then he returned to the map. Serana left, but that second remained. Steiner arrived on the 22nd day, a day later than Wayne had expected. The slush had delayed him.